School Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. World War III alert. China flexes its power in Iran. Trump is pissed off and wants war. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, I got some late breaking news the revolutionaries can use. The dragon is tired of playing. Iran is ready to crush the small hats. Let's get right into the content. Salute. Well, the dragon tired of playing.
Media reports say that Iran has recently acquired the S-400, a mobile surface-to-air missile systems, and the HQ-9B long-range air defense system, as well as surveillance and early warning radars. And locally produced systems such as the Iranian-made WW3 are included in the plan. Thus, Iranian skies have now become fortified by advanced systems from Russia and China, amidst the ambitions of Israel and the US that have just planned to bomb Iran again this year, after losing the 12-day war last year, in 2025. Deputy Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, Brigadier General Abolfazl Shakarchi, emphasized on Tuesday, January 20th, saying Trump knows that we will cut off the hands that reach out to attack the leader of the Islamic Revolution, and we will not give them a safe haven.
Not bluffing, they got the military equipment.
As in rare footage, released by the Russian Ministry of Defense in November 2025, close-up footage shows the S-400 in full operational action. By S-400, Iran is fully prepared to intercept B-52 bomber, capable of carrying nuclear weapons including F-35, as in an illustrative video which Iran says will become a reality soon. China that reinforced Iranian atmosphere, advanced HQ-9B system and related radar equipment, comes amid rising regional tensions, also signaled deeper military cooperation. The advanced air defense systems have reportedly been delivered. Regional intelligence sources say China delivered the HQ-9B and associated radar equipment to Iran in an expedited air shipment. HQ-9B, a move described by security circles as a qualitative shift and a world-class air defense system in its ability to repel any potential attack simultaneously. The HQ-9B system has proven its capabilities by intercepting ballistic missiles at distances of up to 200 kilometers and speeds approaching 10,000 meters per second, almost Mach 29. This is a testament to its precision and effectiveness in modern missile defense. Now the enemy seems hesitant, because the S-400 and HQ-9B systems are already in Iranian hands. And on Wednesday, Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps expressly ordered all military commanders to return to readiness within the next 48 hours.
Iran is strengthening its skies. It has deployed Russian S-400s and Chinese HQ missiles. A secret
Right.
missile deal with
Oh, well,
China
shit.
and Russia and China trying to shield Iran.
You and I both know that
Yeah, this,
geopolitics isn't just speeches and
this about
sanctions.
this about kidnapping Maduro and flexing on China and Venezuela. So China is just returning the favor. The world is a chessboard, and they waiting. They set the trap for Trump and Iran. He talked all that nonsense. Now he gonna have to make his move, or Iran really gonna become a power.
Its hardware, logistics, and timing. And right now, the China-Iran relationship is moving from strategic partnership on paper into something that looks and feels like a live security architecture being built in real time. What we're watching is a major power, China, quietly helping a targeted state, Iran, harden its defenses, keep its economy breathing, and deny Washington and Tel Aviv the easy coercion they've relied on for decades. Let's start with the headline development that changed the entire conversation. Reports that China has moved air defense capability into the Islamic Republic of Iran. In practical terms, that means Iran's air defense network is being reinforced with modern Chinese surface-to-air missile systems that aren't symbolic but structural. The names that keep surfacing are the HQ-9 family and the HQ-22 family, including export variants. And the reason those names matter is simple. These are the kinds of systems that change the cost of air operations, the risk profile for strike packages, and the confidence an attacker has when planning to hit and leave. Take a moment to like and share this video. That would help me out. Thank you. Think about what a long-range system like the HQ-9 class represents. It's not a single launcher sitting in a desert for a photo op. It's a layered engagement concept, long-range missiles, radar coverage, battle management, and integration with broader sensors so that detection turns into tracking, tracking turns into targeting, and targeting turns into interception. In open technical terms, the HQ-9 family is widely described as a long-range SAM class designed to engage aircraft and certain missile and drone threats at significant distances and to create a defended envelope around critical infrastructure, airfields, command nodes, nuclear and energy sites, and the arteries that keep the state functioning. Even if you put aside the marketing numbers and focus on basic military logic, the effect is the same. It forces any would-be attacker to work harder, spend more, and take more risk. What makes these reported Chinese systems even more strategically meaningful is not just their raw missile range, but the idea of radar integration and networked defense. Iran has its own air defense ecosystem. Domestic systems, legacy Russian systems, and a layered doctrine built under sanctions pressure. But when you add a new supplier with different sensor suites and different engagement algorithms, you can complicate the attacker's electronic warfare playbook. You can increase resilience by diversifying radars, command links, and engagement zones. You can harden the system against single-point failure, and you can force the opponent to fight a moving target, literally and operationally, because a modern IADS is not a static thing, it's an evolving organism. Now let's zoom out, because air defense is only the first piece. The deeper question is what else China can provide, directly or indirectly, to expand Iran's deterrent posture. And here we're talking about categories that matter in the real world: fighters, sensors, anti-ship capabilities, missiles, drones, electronic warfare, cyber, and the industrial base that allows Iran to sustain readiness even under economic siege. In the fighter category, the J-10C repeatedly appears as the most strategically plausible upgrade path discussed in defense circles because it is modern enough to matter and available enough to be exportable. If Iran improves its air defense while also modernizing its fighter fleet, you get a different regional geometry. It's one thing to defend sites. It's another to contest airspace, threaten reconnaissance assets, and complicate Israeli operational freedom. And you know what that does? It forces a reconsideration of easy strikes and managed escalation because the margin of safety shrinks. Now, none of this exists in a vacuum. It's happening under escalating tension between Tehran and Washington, and what's new this year is not just rhetoric, but the economic warfare expanding outward. When Washington starts talking about punishing not only Iran, but also countries that trade with Iran, that's not policy detail. That's a strategic message to China. Your relationship with Iran will carry a price. And if you're China, you read that message and you do what major powers do. You hedge, you harden, you build options, and you refuse to let an adversary control your energy security with paperwork and threats. And you refuse to let an adversary control your energy security with paperwork and threats. This is where the US game against China becomes visible, and it's not subtle. The United States has been trying to limit Beijing's global influence by pressuring Chinese supply chains, disrupting Chinese partnerships, and punishing states that give China strategic depth. And it's doing it with blunt instruments, not whispers. When Washington can threaten a sweeping 25% tariff on any country doing business with Iran, that's not targeted pressure anymore. That's an attempt to force entire economies to choose sides. Pair that with the scale of America's sanctions machinery. Hundreds of Iran-related designations in a single year by US authorities, and campaigns that stack up into the high hundreds of persons, vessels, and aircraft sanctioned in a year. And you start to see the playbook as a mass production model. Weaken the partner, choke the money, fracture the coalition, then present the outcome as inevitable and rules-based. Now take that pattern and look at Iran. Iran isn't just another file on someone's desk. Iran is a keystone. It sits in a region where energy, trade routes, and military basing all converge, and where a single spike in risk can ripple through global prices in days. It has influence across multiple theaters. It has strategic geography, and it has the kind of resilience that frustrates regime change playbooks, because it can absorb pressure, reroute trade, and adapt under constraint. So if you're Washington and your larger objective is to keep China from consolidating influence across Eurasia and the Middle East, you don't just contain China in the Pacific. You try to break China's partners where it hurts most: energy corridors, sanctions evasion pathways, and regional anchors that refuse to bend using economic punishment so large that it becomes a deterrent by itself. This is exactly why China cannot treat Iran as disposable. Let's get real. China's economy runs on energy reliability. You can talk values all day, but factories run on fuel. Shipping runs on fuel. Petrochemicals run on feedstock, and industrial stability depends on predictable supply. Iran offers China something extremely valuable: a resilient, discounted, politically aligned source of oil that can keep flowing even when Washington tries to weaponize markets. And the numbers tell you this is not a hobby, it's a pipeline of strategic importance. China has been buying more than 80% of Iran's shipped crude at an average of about 1.38 million barrels per day over the year. And that has been estimated at roughly 13.4% of China's total seaborne oil imports. Add the commercial incentive, discounts often reported in the range of $8 to $10 per barrel versus comparable non-sanctioned grades, and you see why this isn't a side deal. That's strategic throughput. That's keep the lights on oil. That's keep the factories humming oil. And if you disrupt it, you don't just inconvenience China, you push up costs, squeeze refinery margins, complicate inflation management, and inject instability into an economy that Beijing is determined to stabilize. But the relationship isn't only barrels, it's payments, trade architecture, and the slow building of non-dollar pathways. Even when transactions are messy and opaque, the direction is clear. Both China and Iran are motivated to reduce exposure to US-controlled choke points in finance and insurance. That can mean barter-like arrangements, local currency settlement, third-country intermediaries, and a growing sophistication in how trade gets financed under pressure. The key is not the exact mechanism on any given day. The key is that the mechanism exists at all, and it keeps evolving. Now look at infrastructure ties. Iran is a geographic bridge. It connects Central Asia to the Gulf, it connects the Caucasus to warm water routes, and it offers corridor options that matter when other routes become risky or politicized. This is why Belt and Road logic keeps circling back to Iran rail modernization, port development, logistics nodes, industrial zones, and connectivity that can serve as alternatives when choke points or hostile policies make other paths unreliable. The value isn't a romantic train to Beijing fantasy. The value is optionality. China lives on optionality, and Iran gives China optionality in a region where Washington, and here's the part many people don't want to say out loud, if Iran were to be smashed, destabilized, or collapsed into fragmentation, it wouldn't just be Iran's problem. It would be an energy shock problem. It would be a corridor disruption problem. It would be a sanctions escalation problem. It would be a supply chain instability problem. It would create a vacuum that invites chaos across neighboring spaces, and chaos is expensive. For China, chaos is the enemy of planning. Chaos breaks contracts, interrupts shipping, and forces Beijing to spend political capital and money just to restore baseline stability. So no, China does not want Iran burning. China wants Iran functional, resilient, and hard to coerce. All these brings me to a question. Why would Trump or Trump-like leadership pursue regime change in Iran? In the bluntest strategic terms, because detaching Iran from Sino-Russian orbit is a 2-for-1 win for Washington's preferred regional order. First, it weakens a major axis of resistance to US dominance in the Middle East. Second, it undermines China's energy security and its long-term political positioning across Eurasia. And layered on top of that is the Israeli strategic preference. An Iran that is isolated, weakened, and internally destabilized is an Iran less capable of sustaining the wider network of regional pressure that Israel fears. From Israel's perspective, Iran is not just a state. It is the center of gravity behind a broader deterrence and proxy environment. Anything that reduces Iran's ability to support partners, upgrade capabilities, and maintain deterrent credibility is seen as improving Israeli strategic freedom. That's why whenever Israel perceives Iran becoming more defended, more layered in air defense, more resilient in missile capacity, more networked with external suppliers, the reaction tends to be political pressure, escalation rhetoric, and intensified efforts to tighten the noose around Iran economically. Now bring in China again, because this is where the story gets truly dangerous for Washington and Tel Aviv. China doesn't have to love Iran to defend its relationship with Iran. China only has to understand that if Washington can break Iran, Washington proves it can break any partner. That precedent is unacceptable to Beijing. Great powers don't just defend allies for sentiment, they defend the credibility of their own strategic commitments. If China allows Iran to be peeled away, shattered, or converted into a compliant client, every other partner watching from Eurasia to Africa to Latin America will learn a lesson. Chinese partnership does not protect you when the pressure comes. Beijing cannot afford that reputational collapse in the middle of a global competition for influence. This is where people talk about China encircling Iran, and here's the clean way to understand it without theatrics. China is building a strategic arc around the broader region through relationships, corridors, and security cooperation. Pakistan is an obvious node because of deep economic and security ties. Central Asian states are another node because stability there protects Western China and reduces corridor risk. Iraq and the broader neighborhood matter because trade routes, energy politics, and security cooperation interact. Even limited Chinese involvement near Afghan border stability is part of the same logic. Keep the periphery managed so disruptions don't spill into corridors and partners. That is not a secret comic book ring of fire. It is a pragmatic perimeter of relationships designed to deny Washington the ability to isolate and choke China's options. Then there's the military relationship itself, joint exercises, doctrinal learning, technology exposure, and the slow accumulation of interoperability. Even if China is cautious about overt transfers that trigger maximum backlash, it can still deepen Iran's capacity through training, sensor concepts, command and control ideas, and selective capability support. And the psychological effect is enormous. It signals to Washington that Iran is not alone, that Iran has options, and that coercion will not be cheap. Now, how does Israel interpret the growth of China-Iran ties and the possibility of Turkey-Iran coordination in certain moments? Israel reads it as erosion of a long-running strategy. Isolate Iran, keep Iran technologically constrained, and preserve Israeli air superiority and operational freedom as the ultimate bargaining chip. If Iran's air defenses improve, Israel's margin shrinks. If Iran's economy keeps breathing through China, pressure campaigns lose potency. If Turkey refuses to align with interventionist logic, the coalition environment becomes less comfortable. And if China becomes a serious stakeholder in Iran's stability, then any escalation risks dragging in broader consequences that Washington cannot easily compartmentalize. So, what does Israel do in response? It leans on Washington. It pushes for stricter sanctions, broader secondary enforcement, and now tariff-style punishment that threatens the economic interests of Iran's trade partners. It expands covert and cyber pressure to slow specific capabilities. It builds counter-coalitions with states that share anxiety about Iran or China. And it tries to prevent China from becoming too deeply invested in Iran's military modernization by making the costs visible, legal, economic, reputational, and strategic. And when you look at it that way, the logic becomes brutally clear. China doesn't need Iran to win wars for China. China needs Iran to remain standing, trading, and resisting coercion so that China's own strategic environment stays diversified. Iran doesn't need China to fight Iran's battles. Iran needs China to keep the economic oxygen flowing and to help harden the defensive perimeter so that attacks become costly and uncertain. Meanwhile, Washington's objective, especially under a leadership style that favors blunt pressure, becomes to sever that oxygen line and reassert that the US still controls the gates. So the next escalation points almost write themselves. If tariffs and sanctions expand, China will respond by refining how it absorbs Iranian energy and how it shields its firms and shipping from consequences. If Iran's defenses harden, Israel will face a narrowing window for low-risk operations and will likely intensify political pressure for broader US participation in coercion. If the region senses rising risk, states like Turkey and others will publicly call for stability while privately positioning for disruption. And through all of this, the China-Iran relationship will keep evolving, not because it is sentimental, but because it is strategic math. Have you considered what it means if this partnership continues to mature? It means Iran becomes harder to intimidate. It means the Middle East becomes a more contested arena in the larger US-China rivalry. It means energy politics becomes a weapon wielded by multiple hands, not one. And it means the old assumption that Washington and Tel Aviv can decide the tempo and everyone else reacts becomes less reliable. Don't forget that appreciate your decision to watch to this side of things. Subscribe to support me. See you next time.
Salute, fellas.
Trump is moving his aircraft carriers toward the Gulf, and Netanyahu has raised the Iron Dome to its highest alert level, as if something is being quietly rearranged behind the scenes. Meanwhile, on the other side, Iran's coastlines are drowning in deception. Russian experts are inside fortified facilities. Naval missiles are being transported through sealed military routes, and underground sites are being reactivated without a sound. Everything points to a new Russian missile system being quietly deployed, a maritime nightmare that Iran has never officially confirmed receiving, yet it's present in every single calculation inside Washington. So what is this system capable of sinking Trump's most powerful naval assets? Has it already arrived on Iranian soil? There is much to uncover in this episode. Stay with us. Although Iran has not officially acknowledged its arrival, the Russian coastal defense system P-800 Bastion has effectively become a reality, planted along the shoreline, fully armed and ready to strike. This is confirmed by multiple overlapping intelligence and media reports, including a Reuters article from March 2025, which revealed the arrival of Russian missile experts at fortified Iranian military locations. Other reports spoke of Yakon missiles being transferred through covered channels, as well as the reactivation of underground facilities tied to Iran's coastal missile infrastructure. Western diplomatic sources further revealed that these movements coincide with the Strategic Cooperation Treaty signed between Moscow and Tehran in January 2025, a treaty later interpreted as the political cover for the transfer of Russian naval missile technologies to Iran, including systems like Onyx and Bastion. The facts on the ground are clear. The system has been deployed, concealed within the terrain, and made fully operational, coinciding precisely with the deployment of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower CVN-69 to the Gulf. This prompted U.S. military assessments to designate certain Iranian coastal sites as red zones due to the potential threat of supersonic cruise missile launches from those locations. But even more dangerous than the Bastion system itself is the missile it carries. The P-800 Onyx, or Yakon, in its export version, is no ordinary cruise missile. It's a highly intelligent offensive weapon designed to rip large warships out of the sea with supersonic speed and pinpoint accuracy that leaves no room for survival. It was developed as the successor to the Soviet Musket missile, but is far more than just an upgrade. It's a generational leap forward, especially in its ability to operate in coordinated swarms, using silent radar synchronization and pack attack logic. Structurally, the missile measures 8.6 meters in length, 700 millimeters in diameter, and weighs around 3,000 kilograms at launch. Its body features a stealth-optimized design that reduces radar visibility, coated with infrared absorbent material to minimize thermal detection, making it extremely hard to track even for US systems like Aegis or the SM-6. It uses a hybrid propulsion system. The first stage is a solid fuel booster, which detaches after launch and ignites a powerful ramjet engine capable of sustaining speeds up to Mach 2.5, which is over 3,000 kilometers per hour all the way to the target. This cuts down enemy reaction time to under 30 seconds in certain scenarios. The guidance system is sophisticated and precise. Initially, the missile follows an inertial navigation system before activating its internal active radar seeker in the terminal phase, allowing it to lock onto its target even in the presence of heavy jamming or decoys. In its Russian configurations, the seeker head is so advanced it can distinguish between naval vessels and automatically prioritize high-value targets, choosing, for example, an aircraft carrier over escorting destroyers. What truly sets Onyx apart, however, is its group intelligence system. In coordinated launches, a set of missiles can operate as a team. One acts as the leader, broadcasting tracking data, while the others fly silently with no radar emissions, minimizing their signature. If the lead missile is shot down, command seamlessly transfers to another, ensuring the attack continues without disruption. Its warhead is a high explosive penetrator, weighing between 200 and 250 kilograms, engineered to breach the carrier's deck and reach lower levels before detonating. This could paralyze command systems or cause catastrophic fires on the flight deck. Unconfirmed reports suggest some Russian variants may be nuclear capable, with yields of up to 200 to 250 kilotons, though this has never been officially acknowledged in any export agreements. Onyx offers multiple flight profiles that overwhelm air defense systems. In the high-low mode, it ascends to 14 kilometers before diving to 10 to 15 meters near the target, giving it a maximum range of up to 600 kilometers in Russian versions. In full sea skimming mode, it flies at an ultra-low altitude throughout the flight, hugging the surface to stay below radar detection thresholds, with an operational range between 120 and 250 kilometers, depending on terrain and atmospheric conditions. This versatility allows Iran to adjust its strike paths based on evolving radar threats while maintaining a high probability of penetrating enemy defenses. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of this missile is its direct effect on US aircraft carriers. In theory, a single hit from Onyx to the island superstructure, the ammunition elevators, or the fuel storage decks would be enough to completely disable a carrier without sinking it. And since the terminal flight altitude is just 10 to 15 meters, radar detection time is limited to 25 to 30 seconds, which is far too short even for the most advanced US systems like Aegis to track, target, and intercept the missile with guaranteed success. Now, the question is yours, dear viewer. Do you believe Trump would risk pushing his aircraft carrier into the range of Iran's Bastion missiles, or does the US Navy still have cards it hasn't played yet? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Have you ever wondered about the actual missile power of Iran? Today, we want to uncover secrets behind hidden arsenals in reports. Is it really just 3,000 missiles or tens of thousands hidden? Stay with us for a different and deep look at this military mystery. Let's start the discussion with a major disagreement in intelligence reports. Some Western sources claim Iran's missile capability is very limited and specific, but looking at the military logic and long-term strategies of the Islamic Republic changes things. Today, we want to examine why these numbers on paper don't match up. Think carefully about a country like Iran that is prepared for years. Is it logical to base its entire defense strategy on a few missiles? Military experts say that for a country at this level, quantity is quality. Iran's reliance on a limited ammunition depot means losing in the first week. You have surely seen videos of those underground missile cities in the news. IRGC commanders have repeatedly noted that these images are just the iceberg's tip. If we base our calculations on claims about the continuous construction of these towns, we face a massive, intricate network of secret bases deep inside Iran's mountains. Let's base a precise mathematical calculation on the claim of aerospace commanders. A senior Iranian commander said, if we unveil one missile city every week, it would take about 2 years to show all existing underground facilities. This means we are facing a number equivalent to 104 large missile cities. Even if we assume there are only 100 missiles in each site, a simple multiplication brings us to over 10,000 missiles ready to fire. This is just a very conservative and minimal estimate for such massive facilities. The field reality of Iran's arsenal might be 2 or 3 times these estimates. The truth is that no one but high-ranking officials knows the exact statistics. This ambiguity and fog of war is part of Tehran's deterrence strategy. When the opponent does not know the volume of fire, they act more cautiously. This classic Iranian tactic to avoid direct military conflict is very efficient and smart. It is not just about stockpiles. Consider Iran's daily production line capacity. Technical reports show that missile factories in Iran are active around the clock. This means Iran's missile arsenal is not a fixed number and grows daily. The power to recover and replace spent ammunition is key to Iran's victory. There is a common misconception that Iran's older missiles are no longer effective, but in the weapons world, old systems are constantly rebuilt and upgraded with tech. A 10-year-old Sejal missile can be equipped with a precise guidance system today. Therefore, no part of this massive arsenal should be considered out of service. Now, let's turn the camera and look at the air defense systems. Can systems like the Iron Dome withstand Iran's massive and simultaneous launches? The number of interceptor missiles in any defense system is limited and finite. In a long battle, mathematics and logistics will work in favor of Iran's offense. Imagine a scene where 2,000 Iranian missiles are fired at once. Military strategists call this dangerous tactic a swarm attack or radar saturation. Iran's main goal here is to confuse radars and deplete defense system interceptors. Even the most advanced shields will be vulnerable against this volume of projectiles. These potential Iranian attacks are designed and executed in successive heavy waves. The first wave of 2,000 to drain defenses, the next to hit targets. This is a scenario that has stolen sleep from defense system designers abroad. Countering such a rain of fire requires coordination and very heavy costs. You might ask, why not bomb and destroy these Iranian bases before firing? The answer lies in the deep earth and reinforced concrete covering IRGC cities. Destroying hundreds of targets hidden deep in Iran's mountains seems almost impossible. The attacking air force faces huge challenges penetrating these deep underground fortresses. The geographic dispersion of these sites across Iran's map makes the job harder. From western mountains to central deserts, these launch nests are all spread. One cannot successfully operate in 100 different points of Iran simultaneously. This force distribution guarantees the survival of Iran's offensive system in worst-case scenarios. Even if the entrances to some Iranian tunnels are blocked by bunker busters, equipment inside and command systems remain intact and operational for a long time. These bases have independent power and ventilation systems to survive during a siege. Therefore, Iran's counterattack capability remains preserved even after heavy aerial bombardments. We must not forget this equation is not just between two specific countries. Proxy groups aligned with Iran in the region also have their own capabilities. This adds complex layers to defense against Iran that are difficult to calculate. The danger can engage systems from several different fronts at the same time. Sometimes there is talk of a preemptive strike to stop these Iranian missiles, but military doctrine says this action carries very high risks and unpredictable consequences. If the first blow cannot paralyze Iran's missile power, the response will be devastating. That is why analysts believe the military option against Iran is full of ambiguity. Let's do some math and look at the staggering costs of missile warfare. The price of a defensor interceptor is much higher than Iran's offensive missiles. In a war of attrition, the defending side comes under financial pressure much faster. This economic asymmetry is considered one of the main pillars of Iran's strategy. The lack of precise field intelligence has created a dangerous guessing game. Intelligence agencies try to estimate Iran's capacities with satellite images, but it is hard. Iran's underground facilities cannot be easily monitored and accurately assessed from space. This issue causes military planners to always consider the worst possible case scenario. What do recent movements in the region, like moving U.S. fleets, signify? Troop deployments in neighboring countries show everyone is preparing for confrontation scenarios. These military arrangements are signals showing that the Iranian missile threat is taken seriously. But are these just a show of force or a real prelude to conflict? Ultimately, we must know these weapons are mostly tools for Tehran's political bargaining. Iran's main goal is to raise the war cost so high the enemy regrets. Unveiling these missile cities sends a clear message: do not attack Iran. Deterrence means convincing the enemy that starting a war is not in their interest. We are witnessing an endless technological race between Iran's missile speed and interception. News of Iran acquiring technologies like hypersonics can change the rules of the game. If Iran achieves technological superiority, the balance of power in the Middle East shifts. We are watching a breathtaking arms race happening right now in real time. Alongside heated military discussions, we must not neglect the vital role of diplomacy. Iran often uses these military capabilities as winning cards in negotiations. A powerful military stance can change the path of political talks in Iran's favor. But there is always the danger that a miscalculation could lead to disaster. What will the future of the region and Iran's military power look like? Trends show that Iranian missiles will become more precise, faster, and more destructive. If a diplomatic solution is not found, stockpiling weapons will continue with speed. The potential for conflict based on a misunderstanding remains very high. Thank you very much for staying with us through the strategic analysis. What is your opinion? Can defense systems Have you heard Iran tested an ICBM inside Russia? They say a terrifying ballistic missile hit deep Siberia. This news changes all global war equations and threats. Stay with me to uncover this dark military secret. Hello to all my dear friends and constant viewers. Today, we discuss a topic that keeps enemies awake. We will talk about Iran's power and Russian alliance. So pour your tea and listen closely to these words. It started with controversial reports from Israeli media outlets. They claimed Russia agreed to this major missile test. Imagine firing a missile from Iranian soil into Russia. This cooperation goes far beyond what Westerners ever imagined. Why Siberia? Because the distance from Semnon is vast. We are talking about 3,000 to 6,000 kilometers. This is exactly the range needed for intercontinental missiles. Russia, with its vast land, was the perfect test bed. Reports indicate that this huge test was completely successful. Hitting a target at that distance is no joke. It means Iran has technology to traverse the globe. Success that makes military strategists in Washington shake with fear. Many think this message was sent only to Israel, but the truth is the main audience is America. Israel was already threatened by Khorramshahr and Sigil missiles. This time, the story is about reaching American soil. Why now? Because America threatens from across the world. They always threaten Iran with war and military attacks. Iran must show that it is not under their thumb. If there is war, US soil is not safe. This is deterrence logic. If you strike, you bleed. Iran does not want to just watch and wait. They have prepared and equipped their arsenal for emergencies. These missiles guarantee safety against bullying by global powers. For a year, whispers of this missile were heard. Everyone waited to see if Iran really had power. Now, this rumor has become a scary Western reality. They can no longer ignore Iran's missile capabilities easily. Well, let's leave missiles and check another masterpiece, the hot topic of Russian electronic warfare systems in Iran. Did you know how Starlink internet was suddenly paralyzed? A terrifying advanced system is involved that is amazing. The name of this Russian system is Tirada-2, friends. It is an electronic warfare system that cuts communications. Russians designed this technology specifically to blind enemy satellites. Now imagine this giant electronic system is in Iran's hands. Tirada's job is to strictly limit access to internet. They can block satellite communications in a defined geography. It means blocking the internet in a defined geography. This means absolute power in controlling cyberspace and communications. Reports say Iran has imported Tirada-2 into the country. This system is placed alongside other electronic warfare tools. Combining these systems created an impenetrable firewall for them, a wall that even Elon Musk could not breach. Everyone thought Starlink could bring free internet to Iran, but Tirada-2 defeated this project like drinking water easily. This system strangled the Starlink satellite signals at birth, a huge technical victory for Iran against American technology. The scarier point is not just cutting the internet. Iran could find user locations with these advanced systems. Those who tried to connect were identified and exposed. It means there is no hiding place for saboteurs. When user locations were found, security forces acted. They went straight to the leaders and arrested them. These operations showed Iran's intelligence superiority is very high. Western tech remained useless against these smart defense tactics. Remember the giant Russian planes constantly flying to Iran? Before the riots, suspicious flights came from Russia often. Now it is clear they likely brought this equipment, an air bridge that guaranteed Iran's electronic security completely. Of course, Tirada is not alone. It has friends. Another powerful system named Murmansk was given to Iran. When these systems work together, they perform electronic miracles. Their power can even disrupt enemy military communications easily. Iran itself is not helpless and has own products. Systems like Syad and Cobra version 8 are domestic. These are known and famous even in the US. The mix of local and Russian tech created nightmares. Iranian systems cut communications and create major GPS disruptions. They can confuse enemy missiles and drones as well. But when discussing satellites, Tirada-2 always speaks the first word. It is a smart division of labor between systems. Finally, we saw Starlink's project fail hard in Iran. The hopes Westerners pinned on this internet were destroyed. This showed today's war is a war of frequencies, and Iran has the upper hand in this battle. You might say Iran could control without these too. Yes, but these systems made the job much easier. They could end the chaos quickly without high costs. Speed of action is the most vital security factor. Using this technology reduced financial and human damage significantly. When networks are identified fast, chaos subsides much sooner. This means crisis management using the edge of technology. Iran showed it has mastered hybrid warfare skills well. These stories show the depth of Tehran-Moscow strategic alliance. Russia gives its most advanced weapons to its ally, and Iran reciprocally helps Russia in other important fields. This is an anti-Western coalition changing the whole world. Thank you for staying with us until the end. What is your opinion on Iran's missile and
Tonight, we bring you a development that has fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Middle East and perhaps the world. A development that intelligence agencies tracked in real time but could not prevent, a development that signals the end of one era and the beginning of something far more dangerous. China has just completed the largest military equipment transfer to Iran in history. 10 Y-20 strategic cargo aircraft, the backbone of China's military airlift capability, have landed in Iran over the past 72 hours, carrying an arsenal of advanced weapons systems that will transform Tehran's military capabilities overnight. Winglung combat drones, Rainbow CH-5 and CH-7 strike platforms, the stealthy GJ-11 Sharp Sword, the hypersonic WZ-8 reconnaissance drone, and most alarmingly, the Jiutian, China's revolutionary drone mothership system. Reports indicate the shipments also included hypersonic missile components and advanced air defense systems. This is not a routine arms deal. This is not incremental cooperation. This is China throwing its full military weight behind Iran and daring the United States and Israel to respond. Tonight, we examine what was delivered, what it means for regional security, and why this moment may be remembered as the beginning of a new world order. For years, Western strategists operated under a comfortable assumption about China's approach to the Middle East. The assumption was that Beijing prioritized economic interests over military entanglements. China wanted oil, markets, and infrastructure contracts. It did not want to be drawn into the region's conflicts. This assumption shaped American policy. It shaped Israeli calculations. It shaped the entire Western approach to containing Iran. And this assumption, as of this week, has been proven catastrophically wrong. The signs were there for those willing to see them. The 25-year strategic cooperation agreement signed between China and Iran in 2021, worth an estimated $400 billion. The joint naval exercises in the Gulf of Oman, growing larger and more sophisticated each year. The quiet technology transfers that upgraded Iranian missile capabilities, the diplomatic support at the United Nations, shielding Iran from the harshest sanctions. But these were incremental steps, deniable actions, moves that could be explained as commercial interests or diplomatic hedging. What happened this week is different. 10 Y-20 aircraft, China's most advanced military cargo planes, landing at Iranian military airfields, unloading weapons systems that represent the cutting edge of Chinese military technology. This is not hedging. This is commitment, and it changes everything. The first Y-20 touched down at Mehrabad Air Base near Tehran early Monday morning. American satellites tracked the flight from its origin in western China across Central Asian airspace into Iranian territory. The aircraft's transponder was disabled, but its radar signature was unmistakable. Within hours, a second Y-20 landed, then a third. By Wednesday evening, 10 of China's strategic cargo aircraft had completed the journey. Intelligence analysts immediately began assessing the cargo, the size and configuration of the shipping containers, the ground handling equipment deployed to receive them, the personnel present at the airfields, the subsequent movement of materials to Iranian military facilities. What they pieced together is extraordinary. The shipments included multiple variants of the Wing-Lung drone family combat-proven systems that China has exported to allies across the Middle East and Africa. These are not reconnaissance platforms. They are hunters, capable of carrying precision-guided munitions and loitering over battlefields for extended periods. More significantly, the delivery included Rainbow Series drones, the CH-5 and CH-7 systems that represent a significant step up in capability. The CH-7 in particular is a stealth flying wing design capable of evading radar detection while conducting strike missions deep in enemy territory. But the truly alarming components were still being unloaded. The GJ-11 Sharp Sword, China's most advanced stealth unmanned combat aerial vehicle. A system that has never been exported before, a platform that rivals anything in the American or Israeli arsenal. The WZ-8, a hypersonic reconnaissance drone capable of speeds exceeding Mach 3, designed to penetrate the most sophisticated air defenses and provide real-time intelligence that no countermeasure can prevent, and the Jiutiana drone mothership system that can deploy, control, and recover swarms of smaller drones, overwhelming enemy defenses through sheer numbers and coordination. This is not a weapons shipment. This is a revolution in Iranian military capability delivered in 72 hours. The response from Washington was immediate and alarmed. The White House convened an emergency National Security Council meeting within hours of the first confirmed landing. The Pentagon established a crisis task force to assess implications. The State Department summoned China's ambassador for what was described as an extremely frank discussion. Behind closed doors, the reaction was more intense. According to sources familiar with the discussions, senior officials described the transfer as an act of strategic hostility that fundamentally altered the regional balance. One official reportedly stated, "Let me walk through exactly what was delivered, because understanding the specific systems reveals the true scope of this transfer." First, the Wing-Lung family. These are combat drones that China has refined through years of development and real-world deployment. The Wing-Lung 2, in particular, has been battle-tested in conflicts across the Middle East and Africa, demonstrating reliability and lethality. Iran already possessed some drone capability, including domestically produced systems and copies of captured American drones. But the Wing Lung represents a significant upgrade, more range, more payload capacity, more sophisticated targeting systems. Analysts estimate that dozens of Wing Lung units were included in the shipment, giving Iran an immediate operational capability that would have taken years to develop domestically. Second, the Rainbow series. The CH-5 is often compared to the American MQ-9 Reaper, a large, capable platform designed for extended missions. It can carry precision-guided munitions, conduct surveillance, and provide targeting data to other systems. The CH-7 is something else entirely. Its stealth design makes it difficult to detect on radar. Its flying wing configuration gives it extended range and endurance. It is designed to penetrate defended airspace and strike high-value targets. Iran has never possessed anything like the CH-7. Neither have most nations. This is a capability that changes the strategic equation entirely. Third, the GJ-11 Sharp Sword. This is China's most advanced unmanned combat platform, a tailless flying wing with low observable characteristics that make it extremely difficult to detect and track. The GJ-11 has never been exported before. Its inclusion in this shipment signals that China is holding nothing back. It is providing Iran with capabilities it has not shared with any other partner. Fourth, the WZ-8. This hypersonic reconnaissance drone is designed for one purpose: to go places that nothing else can reach and survive. Flying at speeds exceeding Mach 3 and at extreme altitudes, the WZ-8 can penetrate the most sophisticated air defense networks. It can provide real-time intelligence on enemy positions, movements, and capabilities, intelligence that no current system can prevent. For Israel, whose technological superiority has always depended partly on information advantage, the WZ-8 is a nightmare. It means Iran can see what Israel sees or more. Fifth, the Jutian drone mothership. This is perhaps the most revolutionary system in the shipment. The Jutian is designed to deploy, control, recover swarms of smaller drones, creating coordinated attacks that overwhelm enemy defenses through sheer numbers. Imagine dozens or hundreds of small attack drones, all controlled by a single platform, all coordinating their movements, all striking simultaneously from multiple directions. This is the future of warfare, and Iran now possesses it. Finally, hypersonic missiles and air defense systems. Details on these components are still emerging, but intelligence suggests that the shipment included components for hypersonic strike systems, weapons that travel at speeds exceeding Mach 5, maneuvering in ways that make them virtually impossible to intercept. Additionally, advanced air defense components, possibly including elements of the HQ-9 or newer systems, would dramatically upgrade Iran's ability to protect its airspace and critical facilities. The complete package represents a quantum leap in Iranian military capability, achieved not through decades of indigenous development, but through a single, massive transfer from the world's second-largest military power. And here is where we must understand the deeper strategic logic behind China's decision. This transfer is not primarily about Iran, it is about the United States. China is engaged in a long-term strategic competition with America, a competition for global influence, economic dominance, and ultimately the shape of the international order. In that competition, Iran is a useful tool. Every American asset deployed to the Middle East is an asset not deployed to the Pacific. Every dollar spent containing Iran is a dollar not spent competing with China. Every crisis that consumes American attention is a crisis that provides China with freedom to maneuver. By dramatically upgrading Iran's military capability, China has ensured that the Middle East will remain a strategic drain on American resources for years, perhaps decades to come. But there is more to it than strategic distraction. This transfer is also a message about the limits of American power and the emergence of a multipolar world. For 30 years, the United States has dominated global arms markets. American weapons have equipped allies. American technology has set the standard. American approval has been required for major military transfers anywhere in the world. China is now demonstrating that this era is over. It can arm who it chooses. It can transfer what it chooses, and the United States cannot stop it. This is a direct challenge to American hegemony delivered in the form of cargo planes landing in Tehran. The scale of this transfer becomes clearer when you understand what 10 Y-20 aircraft can carry. The Y-20 is China's largest military transport, capable of carrying approximately 66 tons of cargo per flight. 10 flights represent a total capacity of approximately 660 tons of military equipment. To put this in perspective, that is equivalent to dozens of complete drone systems, thousands of missiles, hundreds of tons of support equipment, spare parts, and ammunition. This is not a symbolic gesture. This is an operational capability. Transfer of massive proportions. And the Y-20s may not be finished. Intelligence sources indicate that additional flights are being prepared. The initial 10 aircraft may represent only the first wave of a sustained airlift operation designed to transform Iran into a regional military powerhouse. Meanwhile, the ripple effects are already being felt across the Middle East. Saudi Arabia has requested emergency consultations with Washington regarding its air defense needs. The United Arab Emirates has accelerated discussions about acquiring additional American systems. Israel has placed its air force on heightened readiness and is reportedly reassessing its strike planning against Iranian targets. And smaller Gulf states are quietly exploring whether their security relationships with the United States remain adequate or whether they need to hedge toward China themselves. A single week of cargo flights has reshaped the security calculations of an entire region. History provides sobering context for what we are witnessing. In the Cold War, the Soviet Union armed its allies Cuba, Vietnam, Syria, Egypt, creating proxy forces that challenged American interests worldwide. Those transfers shaped decades of conflict and cost countless lives. China is now following a similar pattern, but with 21st century technology. The difference is capability. Soviet weapons of the 1970s were often inferior to their American counterparts. Chinese weapons of the 2020s are, in many cases, comparable and in some areas, potentially superior. The drones, missiles, and air defense systems now in Iranian hands represent technology that did not exist a generation ago. They provide capabilities that fundamentally change what Iran can threaten and what it can defend. When the Soviet Union armed Egypt before the 1973 war, it enabled a conflict that shocked Israel and reshaped the Middle East. The weapons were crude by modern standards, but they were enough to change history. What China has just provided to Iran is far more sophisticated, far more capable, and far more dangerous. The historical parallel is clear, so is the warning. What makes this moment so dangerous is the pressure it creates on all actors involved. Israel now faces an Iran with dramatically enhanced capabilities that could threaten Israeli air superiority, penetrate Israeli air defenses, and strike Israeli territory with unprecedented precision. Israeli military planners must now consider scenarios they previously dismissed. Their window for action against Iranian nuclear facilities may have narrowed significantly. Their assumptions about defensive capabilities must be revised. The pressure to act before Iranian mastery of these new systems is complete will be intense. The United States faces a stark choice. Accept a transformed Middle East, with China as a major military player and Iran as a regional power equipped with cutting-edge systems, or escalate the confrontation with Beijing to levels that risk broader conflict. Neither option is attractive. Both carry enormous risks. Iran, for its part, faces its own pressures, new capabilities, create new temptations. The systems now in Iranian hands could encourage more aggressive behavior, whether against Israel, against Gulf states, or against American forces in the region, and China must manage the consequences of its decision. It has now openly aligned itself with Iran in a way that cannot be walked back. If conflict erupts, China will be implicated. If these weapons are used against Americans, the backlash will be severe. Every actor is now operating under heightened risk. Every decision carries greater consequence. The margin for error has collapsed. Israel's response to the transfer has been the most pointed. Prime Minister Netanyahu convened an emergency security cabinet meeting and issued a statement that stopped just short of declaring a red line crossed. He said, "Israel will not accept the introduction of strategic weapons systems that threaten our existence. Those who are our enemies become our enemies. We will act accordingly." The meaning was unmistakable. Israel now considers China a hostile actor. The Pentagon's response was more measured but no less significant. Defense Secretary statements emphasized that all options remain on the table for responding to threats against American forces and allies in the region. Military deployments were announced, additional fighter squadrons to Gulf bases, accelerated delivery of air defense systems to partners, enhanced naval presence in the Arabian Sea. The State Department summoned China's ambassador for what was described as the most difficult conversation in the history of the bilateral relationship. China's response was defiant. The Foreign Ministry issued a statement defending the transfer as normal military cooperation between sovereign nations and warning against interference in legitimate trade relationships. A spokesperson added pointedly, China will not be lectured by countries that have armed the entire world for decades about responsible arms transfers. The lines are drawn, the positions are hardening, and the path to de-escalation is not obvious. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei addressed the nation following the completion of the transfer in a speech that mixed religious rhetoric with strategic triumphalism. He declared, "The era of Iranian isolation is over. The great nations of the East stand with us against the arrogance of the West. Our enemies believed they could strangle us through sanctions and threats. They have failed." He continued, "Today, Iran possesses capabilities that our enemies never believed possible. We can see what they see, we can strike what they strike, we can defend what they attack. The balance has shifted," and he concluded, "Let our enemies take note. The Islamic Republic is stronger today than at any moment in its history. Those who threaten us will find that we are no longer the Iran of yesterday, we are the Iran of tomorrow." These are not idle words. They are a declaration that Iran intends to use its new capabilities, if not immediately, then when the moment is right. The question is no longer whether Iran has the means to challenge its adversaries. The question is when it will choose to do so. The implications of this transfer extend far beyond the immediate Iran-Israel dynamic. Consider what these systems mean for American forces in the region. There are tens of thousands of American military personnel deployed across the Middle East, in Iraq, in Syria, in Gulf states, on naval vessels in surrounding waters. These forces have operated under the assumption that their bases and ships are protected by superior technology, that Iranian drones and missiles, while dangerous, can be countered by American air defense systems. The systems now in Iranian hands challenge that assumption. Stealth drones that can evade detection, hypersonic missiles that cannot be intercepted, swarm systems that overwhelm point defenses. American bases that were considered secure may now be vulnerable. American ships that patrolled with confidence may now face unprecedented threats. The risk calculation for American military presence in the region has fundamentally changed. And beyond the Middle East, the precedent being set is equally alarming. If China can arm Iran with impunity, what stops it from arming other adversaries of the United States? North Korea, Venezuela, Syria. Any nation willing to serve as a proxy in the competition with America, the global arms control architecture, already weakened, may be on the verge of collapse. Analysts are now considering several scenarios for how this situation might evolve. The first possibility is deterrence equilibrium. Iran's enhanced capabilities deter Israeli and American action, while the threat of retaliation deters Iranian aggression. A tense but stable standoff emerges. The second possibility is preemptive action. Israel, concluding that the window for preventing Iranian nuclear capability is closing, launches strikes before Iran fully integrates its new systems. This risks regional war. The third possibility is proxy escalation. Iran uses its new capabilities to enhance its proxies Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iraqi militias, leading to intensified conflict across multiple fronts without direct state-to-state war. The fourth possibility is great power confrontation. An incident involving Chinese-supplied weapons and American forces triggers a crisis between Washington and Beijing that transcends the Middle East. No one knows which scenario will prevail, but all of them are more dangerous than the world we inhabited 1 week ago. The transfer has created new risks, new instabilities, new pathways to catastrophe, and managing those risks will be the central challenge of the coming years. What we are witnessing is a test of the international order itself. For 3 decades, that order has been defined by American military supremacy and American-led alliances. China is now directly challenging that order, not through abstract competition, but through concrete action. By arming Iran with systems that can threaten American forces and allies, China has demonstrated that it will no longer defer to American preferences. The question is how America responds. Does it accept a diminished role, acknowledging that the era of unchallenged supremacy is over? Does it escalate, risking confrontation with a nuclear-armed peer competitor? Or does it find some middle path, managing competition without catastrophe, accepting change without capitulation? These are the questions that will define the coming decade, and the answers will shape the world our children inherit. In the hours since the last Y-20 departed Iranian airspace, several significant developments have occurred. Satellite imagery shows Iranian personnel actively unpacking and inspecting the delivered equipment at multiple military facilities. Integration of these systems into Iranian forces has already begun. The United States has announced sanctions on Chinese entities involved in the transfer sanctions that China has already declared it will ignore. Israel has conducted what it describes as routine air exercises over the Mediterranean, involving scenarios that analysts interpret as practice for long-range strike missions. Gulf states have requested accelerated delivery of American air defense systems, with the Pentagon announcing that some transfers will be expedited. And intelligence sources report that additional Y-20 flights are being prepared in China, suggesting that this transfer may be only the beginning of a sustained military buildup. The situation remains fluid, the implications continue to unfold, and the world watches, uncertain of what comes next as we assess this historic moment. Certain conclusions are unavoidable. The Middle East has been transformed. Iran possesses capabilities it has never had before, capabilities that challenge Israeli supremacy, threaten American forces, and alter the regional balance of power. China has declared itself not through words, but through actions as a major player in Middle Eastern security, willing to arm American adversaries with cutting-edge technology, and the United States faces a new reality, a multipolar world in which its ability to shape events through military dominance is no longer guaranteed. This is not the world that existed last week. This is a new world, more dangerous, more complex, more uncertain. How we navigate this world will determine whether competition remains peaceful or descends into conflict. The stakes could not be higher. And the time for complacency has definitively ended. Tonight, on runways across Iran, technicians are unpacking Chinese drone systems. They are assembling stealth aircraft that can penetrate any defense. They are calibrating missiles that cannot be stopped. They are integrating technologies that change everything. In Washington, officials are scrambling to respond. In Tel Aviv, generals are revising their plans. In Beijing, strategists are watching and calculating, because tonight the world learned something it cannot unlearn. China has chosen a side. China has armed Iran, and nothing will ever be the same. The era of American dominance in the Middle East is ending, the era of great power. Competition has arrived, and the consequences of that arrival are only beginning to unfold. We will be here tracking every development as this new and dangerous chapter in history is written.
Military cargo planes from China have landed in Iran. This is the largest amount of military aid China has ever transferred to Iran in such a short period of time. Donald Trump, when I see this, it really turns my stomach. But he was asked if Iran keeps trying to develop their interballistic missiles. Well, here's what he says. Here's what
will you support an attack, Israeli attack on Iran, if Iran will not have a deal? If Iran will continue with their ballistic missiles and also nuclear weapons?
So he's asked, will you support an Israeli attack on Iran if Iran keeps trying to develop their ballistic missiles and their nuclear missiles? And here's his response.
If they will continue with the missiles, yes. The nuclear, fast.
So yes, he will support an attack by Israel on Iran if they continue to develop their ballistic missiles. And here it is. So this is breaking. Iran successfully tests its first intercontinental ballistic missile. Reports say the missile reached Siberia with Russia's approval. It's considered a major step forward in missile development. The world watches, and Trump's decision now hangs at the tip of this missile. And so there it is. It's a really pretty missile. It's really nice. But anyway, and here I'll give you one more from Monitor. During the last 56 hours, 16 military cargo planes from China have landed in Iran. This is the largest amount of military aid China has ever transferred to Iran in such a short period of time. So, what do you think, Donald? So this is obviously just a game for the Zionists, for Israel. They've want every country they've wanted us to attack. We've attacked for them, right? Whether it's Iraq, whether it's Libya, whether it's Syria, whether it's Yemen. Somalia, the whole it's not stopping now. Lebanon and now Iran. He's already attacked Iran and getting ready to do it again if he keeps his word. And now China's getting involved with ramping up military aid to Iran. And remember this guy? Do you remember this guy? Does the U.S. want to be the policeman of the Middle East, getting nothing but spending precious lives and trillions of dollars protecting others who, in almost all cases, do not appreciate what we are doing? Do we want to be there forever? Time for others to find. What happened to that guy? And what do you think is going to happen in Iran? Go ahead, take it wherever you want.
Well, it's almost never what they say it's about. And so the first attack on Iran, sure, it was motivated in the United States by their nuclear program. But the reality is, I believe, that Israel had calculated that Iran was collecting enough conventional missiles that they could eventually overwhelm the defense of Israel. Their Golden Dome, or Iron Dome, they've only got so many missiles. And so I think that first attack was just about pummeling their conventional missiles so that Israel wouldn't, could act with impunity, could keep acting with impunity and not worry about an attack from Iran. Iran has never had the capability of hitting us with a nuclear weapon. That's not to say they couldn't develop it, or any country that's a first world country, not a third world country, couldn't. With AI, I'm sorry, but any of the missing steps, an AI is going to be able to figure out for you. Like we're going to have super intelligence that's better than our best scientists, and so will any country that's got computers and the power to run them. And so I'm actually a proponent of making sure we have a good missile defense system. I think it'd be a whole hell of a lot cheaper than going around and trying to extinguish the military capability of every country that gets out of the primordial ooze with their technology. Eventually, that's not sustainable. And why can Israel have an Iron Dome and we don't have a dome? I think, and it's it should be something. It's an achievable technical project, given that we've got two oceans between us and most of our adversaries.
So. What is your prediction for what Donald Trump's going to do in Iran, and are we ever going to break this stranglehold that Israel has over our foreign policy?
I don't know if we'll break the stranglehold. My election will be sort of a referendum on that. Can there be one Republican congressman who doesn't toe the line, who doesn't vote for infringements on the First Amendment on campus, just for a foreign country that has, I don't know, about 10 million people or something? It's a referendum on that. So if I lose, I think you should make your blanket even wetter, Jimmy. If I lose, because there is no hope. That's what the three billionaires want to make it a referendum on, is whether there can be any dissension. And that's what they did. I was no big fan of Jamal Bowman or Cori Bush. If you looked at our voting records, I'm not sure we ever voted the same ever on anything. But he lost his race, and she did as well, their primaries, for the wrong reason. And it was to demonstrate, at least to Democrats, that there's a price to pay if you deviate from the foreign policy that Israel wants America to have.
So what can we do? Like, well, here, let me just. There's one more. So I want to. This I can't get over what's going. Honestly, I'm depressed. Honestly, since Trump became president, I didn't have faith that he would be do what he said, but I had hope that he would. And now it's all been down, except for the border. Like, so it turns out you could close the border. By the way, you don't need a wall. You could just kind of almost flip a switch, and he closed the border down. So that was fantastic. But here,
isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? I haven't heard anybody talk about a wall in 9 months. And they claim, and I believe them, I got no reason to disbelieve, that illegal entries have almost completely stopped.
Yeah.
So why clearly all what was needed was a change of policy, not some piece of infrastructure. And the thing with a wall is, when the policy changes, a wall's always going to have a door in it. They could open the doors. And by the way, I voted for the wall. I mean, okay, let's have a wall. But what's interesting is I haven't heard anybody talk about it for a while.
Hey, come see me live on tour, February 20th in Lansing, Michigan, February 21st in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Warning to Trump over his fantasies of stealing Greenland. Keep China out of your mouth. President Trump has ramped up his rhetoric about literally taking over the island recently, warning Denmark that if they don't sell the territory to the US, that he'll use other means, warning, you can do this the easy way or the hard way. And who is Trump trying to frame as the bad guy here? Well, you guessed it, China. He started to claim the reason the US needs to own Greenland is because if they don't, China or Russia will. For the record, China has never had any ambitions to take over Greenland or any other overseas region. It's the US that has 800 military bases around the world, and it's the US that has 100+ troops in Greenland. That's why China has come out telling Trump to stop bringing China into his imperialistic rhetoric, with Foreign Affairs spokesperson Guo Jiakun warning Trump to keep China out of it. Today we'll go beyond the propaganda and look at all the details. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borham here in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. If you're thinking it's absolutely insane that the President of the United States is so blatantly and callously trying to force one of its former NATO allies to give up territory, you'd be right. But that's exactly what's happening with Trump and the Danish territory of Greenland, with the president, just days after invading Venezuela and kidnapping its president, threatening to use force to take over the island if the government of Denmark don't sell it. He claims to need the territory for security reasons, mainly because it sits between North America and the Arctic, making it a perfect location for early missile warning systems, monitoring vessels, and so on. But the government of Denmark and the people of Greenland have said, no, the island is not for sale. That forced Trump to ramp up his rhetoric, threatening tariffs on his own so-called allies in the region who disagree with him annexing the island. On top of that, he hasn't ruled out force, saying we can do this the easy way or the hard way. When asked by a journalist recently how far he'd go to take over the island, Trump replied, "You'll find out." With such violent, threatening, and imperialistic language, you'd think it would be clear as day who the bad guy is here. The United States of America, of course. But Trump is now trying to spin the blame to others. The big boogeymen that he thinks people in the West will still blame for everything. Russia and China. And that's quite ironic considering what Trump and the MAGA movement call Russiagate, the conspiracy that he was working closely with Russia that plagued his entire first presidency. He recently said that if Washington doesn't take over Greenland, then China or Russia will, which is, of course, absolutely ludicrous. China has never shown interest in taking over any foreign territory, least of all an island thousands of kilometers away. It's the US that has 800 military bases around the world, and it's the US that has more than 100 troops stationed on Greenland who've been there since the end of World War II. So China has let Trump know that enough is enough, warning him to keep China out of his mouth when fantasizing about taking over the world. On Monday, China's foreign affairs spokesperson Guo Jiakun made it clear where China stands, saying, "The international law, underpinned by the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, is the foundation of the current international order and must be upheld. We urge the US to stop using the so-called China threat as a pretext for itself to seek selfish gains." And that is exactly right. For too long, the US has scaremongered about China to cover its own back, spreading conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory to keep the wool over the eyes of ordinary Westerners, making them believe that the US and the West is right and good and moral, while China is wrong and dark and dangerous. But with the internet and with China's visa-free travel policies and more, that charade is hard to keep up. No one believes it anymore, not even Trump himself. But that doesn't stop them from lying, unfortunately, which is what Trump is doing now. Of course, the China-US relationship is extremely important to both sides. So this warning from Guo Jiakun will hopefully force Trump to tone it down. What he's doing is blatant imperialism, threatening force and violence to annex foreign territory, and territory of a supposed ally at that. Trump needs to own it and stop with the false pretenses. Despite trying to frame himself as the peace president, he's perhaps worse than any US president before him. Let's just hope he doesn't go much further. And on that note, that will be it for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Will China
Right, so Donald Trump is escalating the threats against Iran again. The language is hardened, the plans are back in circulation, the warnings are bigger and louder and more absolute. And the machinery is being spun as if this is the first time he's done it all over again. But it isn't. All of this is happening after an alleged strike was already prepared and talked up, and then either it wasn't authorized or it was called off at the last minute, depending on which news source you read. So is this more of the same now then? Well, whether it is or not, it blows a hole straight through the idea that you can say the same thing again, louder, and pretend like nothing happened in between. It's like an inverse boy who cried wolf moment. Escalation was taken right to the point where it's supposed to turn into action, and then it didn't. So can we take Trump seriously this time? Should we? Probably safer to than not, but if it all gets watered down again, we shouldn't be that surprised either. But with more assets en route to the Middle East all at the same time this is happening, is there a genuine difference this time? Right, so Donald Trump has ordered the military to draw up new strike plans against Iran. Oh, we're here again, yes. Carrier groups and their assets are moving to the region already, but now the language is hardened once more, and talk of wiping Iran from the face of the earth has been Trump's latest refrain. The USS Abraham Lincoln has been redeployed, refueling tankers and fighter squadrons have been repositioned as well now, and the White House is allowing the impression of imminence to just hang in the air again. Well, this is not the same moment as the strike that was previously prepared and then pulled back on earlier. This is a new escalation returning after that decision. Trump flip-flopping over striking Iran like that's a calm and rational position. Everything unfolding now is happening in the shadow of the last time the line was reached, and he chose not to cross it in the end, begging the question as to whether this time he will. Iran, for their part, has responded accordingly. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, did not issue a screaming denunciation or an emotional threat, as perhaps Western media might prefer. He's really not the sort to do that. He didn't shout at all. He didn't posture either. He just set the terms out and moved on, that they will respond if it happens. Maximum pressure had run its course. Restraint wasn't an offer anymore. And if Iran was hit, it would respond. It's not how you talk if you think bombs are about to fall, though, is it? That's how you talk when you think the test already happened and you held your ground then, so you're going to hold it again now. His language doesn't dare Washington to act. It assumes Washington already showed its hand. And it shuts the door on the idea that saying it aloud will fix that. The same logic runs through the assassination threats aimed at Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Those were meant to force a reaction before a decision was made. Here they came after the decision point passed. Threatening the top of the system while declining to act lower down doesn't raise the pressure, it just moves it sideways a bit. It turns the issue from whether force will be used into whether threats are still believed. Once hesitation's on display like that, the only way to change the calculation is to go further than last time, which leaves the next step that little bit heavier, not easier. Israel's position completes the picture here. Reports that Tel Aviv urged restraint because it was not prepared to absorb Iranian retaliation, the dramatic U-turn from last June, are not incidental either. They expose a fracture in the escalation stacking. American threats towards Iran have always relied on an assumption of Allied absorption, haven't they? Particularly Israeli absorption, because they've been talking it up just as loudly. Netanyahu's been desperate to do this for the last 30 years. So they've absorbed this first wave of consequences that essentially they brought on themselves last time. But when that assumption weakens, as it has now, the threat just loses its comfort zone, its cushioning, doesn't it? The United States can posture alone. It can't regionalize the cost, though. That constraint now operates whether they choose to acknowledge it or not. The regional states have reacted the same way. The calls for restraint from governments that would carry that immediate fallout are not moral interventions either. They're risk assessments. They signal that escalation has become predictably distributive, spreading cost across actors who didn't choose it. When allies begin managing exposure rather than amplifying pressure, the initiator's freedom of movement contracts, and that contraction is already in effect. What makes this moment awkward for Washington is that none of this can be walked back. Military assets can be redeployed again. Language can be softened or sharpened. But what can't be undone is the sequence itself. The preparation, the signaling, the hesitation, compensation through rhetoric is a pattern that teaches the other side where the line actually is. Iran doesn't need to guess anymore. It's watched the full arc play out. War avoided sounds comforting, but it only works if there were still choices left, and there weren't. Sanctions were already burnt out. Cyber pressure has been clocked and countered. The unrest narrative was neutralized. The protests didn't work, did they? What remains is force. And that's where things stopped all of a sudden. Calling that restraint is a way of pretending the room didn't just remain. But that changed the starting point for everything that followed, because threats don't reset anymore. They arrive with a discount built in. The signals get probed instead of trusted. Allies do their own maths earlier because they know who pays first if things spill over. Iran doesn't assume patience because patience already got used up once. None of that needs forecasting. It's simply how these systems learn. And you can hear the problem in the rhetoric since then. The language has shrunk, as inflated as the menu has shrunk. Decisive now covers plans that can't be used up without lighting the region up. All options sits there like a table no one wants to sit at. The act continues because ending it would mean admitting the limit is real. This isn't about evil per se, it's about procedural cowardice, frankly. Wanting to look willing while structuring everything so the decision never quite gets to where it needs to be for things to escalate. It hides in reviews and authorizations and endless conditionals, and it does more damage than open aggression because it tells the other side exactly how long they can afford to wait you out. Iran absorbed the moment and moved on. It treated what happened as settled and spoke from there. Washington didn't answer that position with action, only with more noise, which is all Trump is full of, frankly. And that imbalance doesn't burn off by itself either. It carries forward into the next exchange, of which, where Trump is concerned, there is always another one. And the one after that, sitting there as a condition that limits what can be done and how easily it can be done. That's why the strike Trump didn't launch isn't finished business. It's because anything is about to explode, because the point where pressure is meant to turn into decision turned into visibility instead. And that doesn't age out and doesn't fade away. It stays in place and it shapes what comes next. So now he's chosen to escalate again, it seems. And so the White House is operating inside a constraint like that now, whether they choose to admit it or not. Every new threat is heard with the last pause underneath it. Well, you cancelled things last time. Why should we believe you this time? Every movement of hardware is reading as signaling first and commitment second. Maybe they're serious this time. Maybe they'll back off again. Action's still possible, but it no longer comes cheap. There's a political cost to it now because the last threshold was reached and left open. And this also changes how Iran manages escalation internally. When pressure is believed to have failed, the incentive shifts from avoidance to calibration. Tehran no longer has to assume that restraint buys time. It can assume that restraint simply postpones the next test. And the tests are cheaper to face when the other side has already demonstrated they've got a ceiling that they don't want to cross. And that doesn't require bravado per se. It produces the calm tone that has unsettled Western coverage more than any shouted threat ever would. It makes Iran seem like the grown-ups in the room, though next to Donald Trump, it's not exactly difficult. But there is a deeper institutional problem under that. American coercive strategies relied for decades on the idea that escalation can be paused without cost. But that assumption only holds when the other side believes pause is voluntary. Here, the pause followed visible hesitation. And the difference is not semantic, it's operational. Voluntary restraint preserves ambiguity, but forced restraint removes that. The administrative language now doing the work of containment makes that visible. Phrases like no final authorization and options remain under review are supposed to buy time. But in this content, they advertise indecision. They tell every actor watching that the decision point's already passed once and can pass again. And that knowledge constrains the future far more effectively than any Iranian missile system ever could. Israel's stance makes the problem harder to dodge. When the partner who would take the first blow signals it can't carry that risk, the whole escalation model strains. The United States can threaten Iran all it likes, in effect, but it can't order Israel to eat the consequences. And that's the mismatch that locks in a limit on how far Washington can push this without blowing a hole clean through its own alliance structure. And that limit is already in play, and it's been stressed again. The same logic is showing up now again across the region. The restraint talk isn't about peace, it's about exposure. It assumes spillover as the default and plans around it. And once that mindset takes hold, the space for tidy, controllable escalation disappears. Nothing has to be fired for that damage to still land. Escalation only works when the threat's believable. Once belief slips, the line you're pointing at turns into scenery. You can redraw it, you can shout about it, you can be that boy who cries wolf. You can gesture at it all you like, but it can no longer govern behavior the way it used to. So focusing on Trump's personality, as is so easy to do here, as the background reason that he's doing this again, misses what's actually doing the damage. Because this isn't about temperament, it's about sequence. And any administration that runs escalation the same way runs into the same wall. Once a strike is lined up and talked through and then not taken, doesn't get forgotten about. So the next decision turns up and you're repeating yourself again. It's already carrying that in its memory. Iran's response freezes that condition in place because by saying plainly that maximum pressure is finished and restraint isn't guaranteed, Tehran has stripped out all the gray areas from Washington that they prefer to work in. It isn't trading threats anymore. It's just setting the boundaries. And those boundaries operate whether the White House likes them or not. So on paper, the United States still has overwhelming force. In practice, force only works in practice or matters even if the sequence still carries belief that it'll actually follow through. And yet here it increasingly doesn't. The sequence ran its course. The ceiling showed itself. The cost became obvious. The guesswork stopped. We still can't rule it out for certain, but it just looks less likely this time, doesn't it? And that's why this isn't just another round of rhetoric too, because the system didn't merely shout itself up to the edge and step back. It went all the way through the motions, showed where the limit was, then tried to drown that out with louder language. But volume can't substitute for the enforceability. It just underlines what's missing. The strike Trump didn't launch has already reshaped the field. It locked in a constraint. It thinned out which threats are still taken as seriously, shifted the escalation risk onto whoever chooses to go further next. And that now sits on Washington's side of the table, whether they like it or not, and it's not going anywhere either.
It is January 21st, 2026. And while it may seem like things are eerily quiet surrounding Iran, you have reports that Trump is calling for decisive plans of action to target the country. So, what exactly does that mean? And what should we be concerned about when it comes to the escalation that we're seeing from the US and from Israel? And could it turn nuclear? Well, we got into all of that and more with a special guest earlier. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Colonel Larry Wilkerson, a U.S. Army combat veteran, former Chief of Staff to the U.S. Secretary of State, and a senior fellow at the Eisenhower Media Network. Colonel Wilkerson, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on the show. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here because just 1 week ago, it looked as though the US military was getting ready to bomb Iran. You had 6 refueling tankers taking off from the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. It seemed like something was going to happen. And then Trump came out and he said that he had been told by a very important source that Iran wasn't targeting or planning to execute protesters anymore. And then everything got eerily quiet. We still, of course, have the US military moving assets to the Middle East. And now the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Trump is pressing aids for decisive military options for Iran. So, how do you see the current tensions?
The fact that he said that is indicative of nothing, really, because the military would have already put the options together and the airplanes and ships would already be moving, and they are. And that's what's worrisome to me. The other thing that's worrisome to me is he seems to be basing his decision calculus, entirely on Bibi Netanyahu, which is not surprising. But at this late date in this attempt to bring down the regime in Iran is surprising, because one of the reasons I think we didn't proceed at a moment when it might have seemed propitious to do so was because either Trump got cold feet or Bibi got cold feet or both. And if Bibi got cold feet, it was because the Iranians succeeded in destroying decades of Israeli work inside Iran by capturing these people whom they pinpointed due to the systems Israel was using to communicate with them and put in jail or worse. So Israel has been stripped of its fifth column, if you will, completely now. A lot of this happened before, but only in stages. It happened wholesalely this time. And so there's probably no sympathy for Israel amongst anyone in Iran. And if it is sympathy remaining, it's because lots of money is poured into them. And that's not a real incentive to get yourself killed. Really, believe me, it isn't. So it's a peculiar situation, but the forces are all staging now. In some respects, through Spain, as they did stage for the B-2 strikes before, we have replenished and refurbished, if you will, those aren't the right terms, reset Al Udeid and Qatar and other places in the region that would have been extremely vulnerable. I even understand from some contacts that we have put air defense assets in there that weren't there heretofore. So that anticipates the Iranian attack on U.S. facilities, perhaps even in Bahrain, where the Fifth Fleet headquarters is. The other thing is that Abraham Lincoln is sneaking up on the North Arabian Sea from the east. When I say sneaking up, the kind of signals she'd be sending off were she not sneaking aren't being sent off. So you've got these converging forces, and you've also got the news this morning or late last night that Bibi Netanyahu has said, hold, don't go yet, because I'm really worried about my overhead screen. As well he should be, because he's going to get devastated if Iran cuts loose. So is this all, and that in particular leads me to this comment, is this all subterfuge to once again suck the Iranians into a position where they think no attack is coming, or if it is coming, it's coming in a way they can handle, and then to deliver a blow at a propitious moment in the next week or so that is going to be devastating? And I qualify devastating because there's no way air power alone will defeat Iran or bring the regime down. But maybe something else is in the mix. And the other thing that happened recently, I hope this is not in the mix, but it's always there with Bibi. We had a little seismic indication in the Negev. It was small, and it's being classified by all and sundry as probably earthquake activity, that sort of activity. But it was timed with major operations at Dimona, which is not very far from where it happened in the Negev. So some people are saying, were they testing underground? Were they taking a small yield nuclear device and testing it underground? Is this preparatory to blackmail of Donald Trump? If you don't come in and help me, I'm going to use nuclear weapons. That apparently, I'd give it a 50-50 possibility happened before when Trump was reluctant. Bibi said, well, then I'll just use a nuclear weapon. And Trump said, no, you won't, and conducted the attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities with the B-2s. So that could be happening again. All to say, I don't know. This is really looking bad in some respects. And in other respects, it's looking like it might be just a feint to whatever, bring Iran around to more propitious negotiations, perhaps. But we've seen that before, and we violated that even. In the middle of it, we violated it and attacked. In any event, if we attack, it's going to be a disaster for the region and probably for us too.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing to watch about all of this, because I know when you look at the case with Venezuela, right, they had the USS Gerald R. Ford that was in the Caribbean for a few months before the US really took action. And so when you're looking at all of these military assets headed to the Middle East, you're going, okay, are they going to strike in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months? When it comes to the overall goal in Iran, I know that they want to see regime change, but up until this point, they've hit Iran with all of these sanctions. They've hit Iran with all of these protests, and the government has not fallen. The people, in fact, have rallied even more so for the government, whether they like it or not, because they see the US and Israel as this invading enemy coming in and targeting their country, and they know that they don't want that. So, how do you see kind of the end goal for the US and Israel and what they could realistically actually achieve in Iran? Because it feels like, aside from killing civilians, they're not really accomplishing much at this point.
Well, killing civilians is really the only accomplishment. And it's been a lot of people who were just innocent bystanders. You may have seen the comment that Pompeo made, giving faith to the Iranians who were protesting and the Mossad agents beside them. He actually said that. He actually said that. I couldn't believe it. He tried to back it up. He tried to erase it, but he actually said that. Truth, the truth out of Pompeo's lips. What concerns me, if you take Lincoln, for example, as one example, there is no way you can generate around the clock airstrikes from a single aircraft carrier. You got about 24 hours in terms of stocks on board and in terms of the pilots and the aircraft's ability to generate operations. If you have two carriers, you can generate ops like that for maybe 3 days, 72 hours or so. If you have three carriers, you can do it almost endlessly until your munitions run out or your logistics chain stops. So what is one carrier? Are we just going to conduct airstrikes, which I think is the way we would do it if we did it? And that's going to do nothing but amplify what you just said about the previous business. We're going to make them extremely mad, extremely unified, and they are going to unleash hell on that tiny little statelet called Israel. So I don't understand this. I don't understand it from a decisive, as Trump has said, I want a decisive option. Decisive in military terms means after that action, the enemy has no capability to react. That's what decisive means. Or his ability to react can easily be defeated. I don't know what they're talking about, but that's a term of art in the Pentagon. And if Pete Hegseth and General Kane are going along with that, it has to be a lot more devastating than what we're looking at. Are we talking about Bibi Netanyahu, who is now apparently delayed it a bit, using a nuclear weapon on Iran? That's my true, deep concern.
Yeah, and when you explain it like that, I'm thinking that's kind of what it sounds like. But hypothetically, if they go that route, let's say that Trump says, okay, or Netanyahu talks them into it, they decide to carry out a nuclear attack on Iran. I mean, obviously that would be devastating for Iran. It would also be devastating for Israel as well. So how do you see kind of that conundrum when they're so sure they get a new government in Iran, but the Iranian people are not going to support it? The entire region is going to be devastated. It's going to throw us into yet another version of World War III as you see everyone react. So how do you see kind of that possible plan and the impact that it would have on us? Because it feels like once you hit that point, there's just no going back. It just keeps escalating and escalating.
Ready for a long answer? I think the decision has been made, and I don't for a moment attribute it to Donald Trump, but I do attribute his willingness to carry it out to him. I think we have decided, in conjunction with the 2002 National Security Strategy that was produced by George W. Bush, mind you, my administration, my time in the administration. And at the time, I made a statement to the Secretary of State that this is a very Hobbesian world we're looking at creating. That is exactly where we are now. And Donald Trump and the billionaires behind him, some of them are Jewish, some of them are American, pure American, if you will. Some of them are foreign. But the billionaires that are behind him, one of whom is now our ambassador to guess where? Denmark, who covets mightily Greenland, not for any national security purpose as it is, but for the minerals and other things that he looks at with great repine in his mind. We have a wealth of these people behind Donald Trump. And I think they are taking this strategy in 2002, reinforcing and doubling and tripling down on it. And they are, in effect, trying to create a Hobbesian world upon which we will sit. They're right in Davos. When the Canadian Prime Minister says what he said, when others said what they said, they're right. We are creating havoc in the world. And we think that havoc is going to be something that we can sit atop and manage and be the kingmaker in. And part of that would be opening the genie up, the box the genie's in, for nuclear weapons. Because I think these people have a special inclination towards the inutility of these very expensive weapons we've maintained now for half a century plus and haven't used. And they think there's a utility in them. And that utility could be demonstrated graphically in a place that is a long way away. And that would absolutely change the situation and change it in favor of Israel completely, they think, and in favor of the United States, ultimately, because we are proving that our world is Hobbesian, that we are atop it, and anybody that objects will get the same taste of medicine.
It is extremely concerning when you look at that kind of thinking. And I'm also looking at it and I'm going, okay, let's say that we get to that point, right? You see Israel carry out a nuclear strike on Iran, you see the US directly involved. When you look at Russia and China in that kind of a scenario, because obviously, if something like that were to happen, I could see a major increase in terror attacks here in the US, right? Because people are going to hate the US even more than they ever have before, and they're going to have reason to. So you look at Russia and China, they're separated from this conflict to a certain extent, even though they're, allies with different parties involved. But how do you see their standings? And do you think the US fully realizes what Russia and China are building, especially as, China just saw a record trade surplus? That's something that the US can't even begin to compete with.
That's one reason they're doing it. I think Russia and China, even with Putin's understanding of us now in particular, the man has an intellectual understanding of the empire, I think, that is unrivaled in the world. He probably understands us better than we understand ourselves collectively. Maybe not better than these billionaires behind the scenes, but he does understand. And I think it would put the reinforcement on that understanding for him and for Xi Jinping. It would be a shock of the first order. It would say to them, look, we know that in combination, you could massacre us. We know that economically, China, you already are massacring us. But look at what we'll do. And look at how we are going to manage this potential defeat on your behalf of us. You aren't going to accomplish it. All you're going to accomplish is the defeat of the entire global system, even that which helps you, Xi Jinping, in your economic success, and that you want to protect at all costs and will not go to war with me in any event. because you want to protect it, because you know you're winning. You're winning all over the world. We're going to take you out of that dream. We're going to rip you out of that dream. And Putin, we're going to rip you too, because we're willing, as Putin has said all along, he suspects, to go the whole route.
And you've seen as Russia has shown restraint when it comes to dealing with NATO, especially. You've seen China show restraint. And both of them are looking over here like, oh, is the US going to follow international law? When the US has made it clear it doesn't care about international law. Trump himself has made it clear that in his mind, that is not even a factor. And so as we're kind of watching this buildup around Iran, and as we're watching, Trump arriving in Davos, speaking today to the World Economic Forum, and it's kind of looking like, right, there is this rift between Trump and his European counterparts, because now he has decided that he's going to take Greenland. How do you see kind of that right there, and do the Europeans have a leg to stand on? Obviously, they're not really going to be able to protect Greenland, but beyond that, it does not seem like there's much they can do outside of being US vassal states and kind of going along with whatever Washington wants.
In their present circumstances, with their present leaders, mainly Starmer, Merz, and Macron, they can't do very much at all. They can talk. They can jump around on Greenland, for example, and say, come here and we'll have our military. Well, their military is not in any way, fashion, or form going to stand up to our military, especially at such proximate distance and given the weakness of them without us now. So that's a tempest in a teapot. I don't even think Trump is worried about that. I think he's proceeding with the destruction of NATO, which is what he's wanted to do all along, got kind of held up in doing because of Ukraine and other interests that were playing there. But he's found a new tack now. He's going to end it. And it's going to be ended on a really sour note. Another sign about this world. We don't need anyone. We have what we have, principally 6,000 nuclear warheads. We have a military apparently willing to do just about anything, a resort, if you will, with nuclear weapons back to Smedley Butler's 1930s when he said he was a criminal for capitalism all over the world. Well, now we're going to be a criminal for Donald Trump, or a criminal for the oligarchs behind him. I keep saying Trump. Trump is not really anything but their instrument. They're the ones actually doing all this. And you ask yourself the question, as I did repeatedly this last week, as I was stumbling onto this appreciation of what we're doing, why are they for it? Well, they're for it because they are absolutely angry, pissed off, pick your verb or your combination, at what China's doing. And the fact that China's doing it with no coercion involved other than the pure, real coercion of the money they have and how they're essentially distributing that money. Look at the port on the eastern coast of South America now, the Peruvian port that they just built. It's fabulous. We just started a move with Peru to try and counter it. We're a day late and a dollar short, and really a dollar short. This port is fabulous. And what China's doing with these things is not what Smedley Butler said he was doing for us. They're not being coercive in what they're doing. Now, the coerciveness might come later on. Indeed, if they adopt more imperialist tendencies, then maybe it will. But right now, people in South America, for example, which Trump is so angry about, and which is part of what Venezuela was all about, to drive China out, the Chinese have been accommodating. The people in South America working with the Chinese are getting benefits. They're getting things that are being promised to them, like this port. So, and they don't get them from us. What they get is rape, pillage, and plunder from us, largely allied with their 5% in their countries that are the caudillos and are, essentially helping us to rape their own country, which has been our policy for a long time. So all to say that China is really stealing a march, a huge march, and will be the preeminent power in the world without any question in a very short time. already really is economically, already really is militarily, already really is defense industrial base. Did you see what they did recently? They lined up their deep sea fishing fleet along their southern coast in South China Sea, doubled, and it covered the entire coast. That was not just something they did for beauty and, showing what they had. This world we're creating is, I think, the think tank version, and I go to Heritage, go to any of the ones that are really supportive of the Republican Party. It's their way of countering what is otherwise, in their estimation, not counterable. China's rise. And they've decided that this Hobbesian world is the best recipe for delaying that world's coming about and maybe even stopping it, particularly with regard to the de-dollarization movement and some of the other things that are happening that are really inimical to the maintenance of our empire. I mean, to the point of being existential to the maintenance of our empire. I don't know that that's the case, of course, but I detect it everywhere I look, that chaos, one word, if you want one word to sum it up, chaos is our strategy. Create chaos and then try to make hay out of that chaos.
Yeah, and the US really does seem, well, it's pursuing chaos in so many different places. I mean, you look at them literally kidnapping the sitting president of Venezuela. Why? Because they can, right? Why why other reason to go after, and of course the Venezuelan government is still standing, but I know that Trump has this focus on natural resources. He has this focus on trying to still prove that the US is this powerful empire. And exactly as you're describing it there, this idea that, well, we can't build like China, we don't have the resources like Russia, so we're just going to blow everything up and create chaos everywhere to then show our power. When you look at how Russia and China and Iran are fighting back and what they're capable of doing on their end, I mean, if I were Iran and I were looking at the current state of things, I would be wanting a nuclear weapon for deterrence, let alone an full on attack or Israel possibly attacking them. Do you think that that's something that we could see when it comes to the position that Iran is in, trying to prepare for literally the worst of the worst here?
I do. And I will tell you this, I've said this a number of places. I think Iran made a huge mistake not proceeding with a nuclear weapon, especially if they were going to maintain the philosophy about nuclear weapons that supposedly the fatwa, for example, declaring them anathema. That doesn't mean you can't have them. I mean, I've had this conversation with the Iranian foreign minister who spoke fluent English, and we had a good conversation. It does not mean the fatwa, as I interpreted it, as he interpreted it to me, does not mean that you can't have a nuclear weapon. What it means is if you use it, it's an anathema to Islam that you did it. And that makes sense to me. You can have one in defense of yourself, deterrence, if you will. But if you use it, you're really the devil. I mean, that's sort of the religious interpretation you put on it. I think they made a mistake in not going ahead and completing their nuclear weapon and having a few. I would have said probably the same thing about Pakistan when India and Pakistan were doing it. That's a horrible thing to say if you're a non-proliferation advocate, as I am. But it's a realistic thing to say when you talk about your next door neighbor hating your guts and having a nuclear weapon and bent and determined to destroy you and having a nuclear weapon. The only way you can prevent that ultimately is you have one too. But they didn't do it. And now we're in a circumstance, I don't think they did it. We might find out if they did. But now we're at a point where it's not really relevant because Israel does have them, and it looks like we're coming to a decision point here.
Yeah, when you've got Trump calling for decisive action. And yeah, I mean, people can say whatever they want about North Korea, but no one's messing with them right now. And yet here they are targeting Iran in all of these different ways. And I know that when people talk about the growing multipolar world, right, they look at Russia and China and Iran and all of these countries standing together. But at the end of the day, Russia and China can only do so much. And when it comes to the US waging an all out war on Iran, I mean, I don't necessarily expect Russia and China to send troops or to get directly involved there. But how do you view kind of the multipolar world as a whole and its handling of the US when they keep expecting the US to be sane, to follow international law? And Washington is showing them time and time again that they have no plans to do that, and they are going to keep escalating and destroying and creating more chaos.
I would not want to be in Beijing or Moscow's shoes right now dealing with this empire. I think Putin has been convinced, probably beyond being otherwise convinced, that we are duplicitous, that we lie, that we aren't dealable with, if you will, and that we are probably the biggest threat on the planet to turn to nuclear weapons. One of the reasons he keeps making these statements to Donald Trump, he's made them half a dozen times. Sergei Lavrov has echoed them. Let's sit down and let's make a gentleman's agreement anyway to continue New START. February 26th, I think, is the date it goes out. We apparently have said nothing positive back. He also wants to sit down and deal with them on a more comprehensive basis and bring Xi Jinping in, because Xi Jinping is building out to match ours and Russia's stockpile individually, not, I hope, not in combination. That'd be over 10,000 weapons. But they both understand that this is the most dangerous trajectory the empire is on. And they understand, I think, in their gut, that the empire will, as it was in 1945, the nation first to use nuclear weapons, be the nation second to use nuclear weapons, or one of its proxies like Israel will. I go back to the time when we allowed Israel to build a nuclear weapon, and I said immediately after that, I think that was one of the most dangerous decisions we ever made. We went against our own philosophy of proliferation, non-proliferation. But we created a situation where the imbalance is so pregnant with possibilities that are injurious to others in the region that you knew sooner or later they were going to get a nuclear weapon. And there's no doubt in my mind that if Iran picked up the phone and called Islamabad, or for that matter, if Saudi Arabia did, I think they already have. They've already made a deal, I think. If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia gets 20 tomorrow morning from Pakistan. Operational. So why hasn't that happened? If Iran is such a perfidious nation, there are people, Pakistan comes to mind immediately, that would give Iran a nuclear weapon or two or three. They don't want them. That was the whole situation in Tehran, I think. I believe that situation. I've been told it by a number of people who I think were speaking the truth to me. So why did we allow this to happen to where it's so one-sided that we're looking at the possibility of the side that is going to be beaten conventionally, perhaps even with our help, turning to a nuclear weapon to prevent its existential defeat? It's a strange situation, but it's a situation we concocted.
And you had the US for years and years now saying, oh, Iran is on the verge of creating a nuclear weapon, right?
Bibi,
days away from it.
Every other week, Bibi would say, oh, they're only 7 days away.
He's got all of his charts at the UN ready to go. And I'm like, okay, well, when is that going to happen? Hasn't happened yet. And you have Iran in this position where they keep trying to deal with the US and Israel as if they are sane people and as if they would not go that route. And yet it seems like they're closer than ever to going that route. And it puts us in a very bad situation all around. Certainly a lot at stake here. And I always appreciate you taking the time to join me to break down all of the latest here. Colonel Larry Wilkerson, a U.S. Army combat veteran, former chief of staff to the U.S. Secretary of State, and a senior fellow at the Eisenhower Media Network. Thank you so much for your time.
could you please tell us the mood in Tehran, especially for the past 48 hours, now that the whole narrative and the whole puzzle of the attempted regime coup operation is put in place. And now I'm sure the intelligence all across Iran know exactly what happened. So give us the feeling on the ground about it, please.
Yeah, it's so calm here. No protests, Pepe. It's not just in the last 48 hours. In the last 4 days, 3 days, we haven't had any sort of protests, riots. And, you know, the core issue with these riots was the internet connection, Pepe. The internet connection, they have infiltrated the protests. They were using people from coming from outside and from within the, you know, Pepe, here we have something about 15 million Afghani people. I'm not putting blame on these people, but most of them undocumented people.
15 million?
Yeah, 12 to 15 million.
Yes.
Just imagine a country with 91 million. It's more than 10% of the, you mostly undocumented. And it's so difficult for the security forces to control that. And putting all together with the information, disinformation, you know, fake news, all coming together. And you see these protests, peaceful protests. For the first 2 days, Pepe, there was no violence happening. They thought that these protests, the government gonna react. They're gonna react hard. They're gonna beat the protesters, but that didn't happen. So they turned the protests into riots. There were people within the protesters shooting at both the people, the protesters, and the security forces. It's all about, for those people who are familiar with Maidan and what has happened in Maidan, it's all over again. You see the same sort of scenario happening here. But I can say that in the last, 4 days, and there is nothing happening. Since the connection, in the internet was cut off, we had the protests disappeared, and we don't have the protests. People are just living their lives, and it seems that nothing has happened. But from the outside, looking at the outside, they say, they're gonna, the whole rhetoric with the Trump attack on Iran was they want to kill more than 800 people and something like that. It was amazing that, it's all coming from the outside. Nothing is happening from the inside.
Of course, yeah.
This is amazing. What it was happening from the inside was these people who infiltrated the protests, who tried to use ordinary people to do, they were somehow, the management was from outside. The Starlink was the core to what was happening here in Iran. The arms coming from the outside. You see here in Iran, you cannot have an arm. It's forbidden to have an arm here. It's not like the United States, you can buy any sort of arm on, But here, when someone comes out and shooting at the people, at the security forces using the guns, these, sort of, professional guns, and you see, this is not from inside. And the other thing, Pepe, that was unbelievable. I have never seen, I have never heard, the Green Movement, you remember the Green Movement during those days. Yeah, during those days, the situation was somehow different. But we have all the history of the movement, of these sort of protests, these sort of riots here in Iran. We have never seen beheading people, putting people into the fire, live people, it's setting people, it's unbelievable what has happened. Beheading people, it's something I can say that it's not coming from the Iranian society. It's not an Iranian sort of attitude. It's coming from the outside. It's a Daesh sort of attitude.
Absolutely. They import
Nobody believed that.
ISIS cells, of course. Yeah.
They have infiltrated. Here is the issue, Pepe. Here is the issue. I think that's coming from Syria. That's coming from total chaos in Syria and all coming to the Central Asia. These people, radical, mostly Salafi, jihadi people, and they have managed to come in Iran, to convince some people in Iran who are somehow, the rhetoric resonates with these people in Iran. I don't know who are these people. We still don't have the information. The government didn't publish. We don't know what was happening, but I can tell from the pictures, from the footages, from the images that I've seen so far, this wasn't Iranian protest.
Of course.
This wasn't Iranian protest. It was totally managed from the outside. It was what was the difference from what we've seen so far from the other protests and riots in the past, that the monarchs, the people who are supporting the son of the Shah of Iran, they were not cooperating with Israel before, as obvious as we see right now. But today, with these protests, you see they are, clearly cooperating with Israelis, with the Mossad, to do everything, to use their leverage, and that was one of the major issues here, because the people, this guy is the son of the Shah. Why is he doing this? He wasn't like this before. If he was behind the scene.
No. He was
not this much obvious.
He was lavishly paid to do that, Nima. He was recontacted and reworked by CIA and NED with the help of Mossad, of course. The Israelis were as an intel operation. He was one of the key planks of the whole intel operation, with this reactivation of Daesh, ISIS, and cells infiltrated especially in the eastern part of Iran via Afghanistan. People who cross the border, as you know very well, that border, the Afghan-Iranian border, is extremely porous. Everybody can cross that border. So all of this makes sense in terms of how they organized the operation. And of course, when I started looking at the images, I was immediately reminded of a color revolution that I was there in Hong Kong in 2019. Exactly the same modus operandi. The only difference is that at the time, these people were coordinated by the gigantic, sprawling American embassy in Hong Kong. This time, it's different. This time, it was more fragmented and diffuse. It was controlled by these cells a little bit everywhere, who were passing information via Starlink exactly to the killers, to the beheaders, to the ISIS-linked mini cells, etc. But the modus operandi is the same that they used in Hong Kong, which is in a very sophisticated society. And because Iran is much bigger and more fragmented, it was even easier to infiltrate. And they infiltrated in different areas of Iran, like in Khuzestan, where you were 2 weeks ago, right? Like in Iran, Kurdistan, near Iraq. It's much easier to infiltrate these borders. And of course, in the east with the Afghan border. But the thing is, it was diffused relatively fast, don't you think? It took basically
exactly
to get the head of all the snakes involved. But I have another question for you, Nima, in two parts. One, the exchange rate of the real vis-a-vis the dollar. The way I analyzed it, the key element to destabilize Iran and force these economic protests was a speculative attack on the real. that lasted for a few days, and the currency completely collapsed. So my question to you is the exchange rate now back to what it was before the protests? Is it stagnated? Is it still going down? Where is it now?
It's just hitting some sort of, is stagnation, because it's not going up and down. But what the government is trying to do, Pepe, they have tried to, as you've mentioned, it wasn't something happening from inside, Pepe. It wasn't something, a drastic change in the attitude of the government, or some sort of, shortage of a single product, many products, or it wasn't this. It was some sort of propaganda. It was some sort of, the pressure coming from the outside. I don't know how they could do that. The government may, study that, what was happening, because it wasn't happening overnight, Pepe. It was happening during a short period of time.
It was an attack against the currency that started weeks ago. So people start immediately seeing their spending power diminishing in front of their eyes. So that was the key main reason for those initial protests against, the fall of their living standards, spending power, inflation in front of them. They going to the grocery shop and you're paying almost double what you paid a few days before. So this works in every attempt at regime change. So that's why I asked this question. If things now are starting to be more normalized, still the real vis-a-vis the dollar, we all know it's worth literally nothing. But a few weeks ago, it was less than nothing. And that prompted the first protests.
Yeah, actually, the real is not doing great, by the way. I can say that.
Never is. It never is. You know that my favorite my favorite meter, when I am in Iran, Nima, I go in front of the Grand Bazaar and I talk to the money sellers. That's when you get the feeling of real life in Tehran. And I'm sure these guys a few weeks ago, they were already looking at the real going down, like, big time, much harder than before. And they said, oops, there is something's going to happen. They are the first ones who pick up this vibe. But okay, Nima, one thing, my column was just published by Strategic Culture. I wonder if you could put it on the screen, because in this column I try to put this all together. The reasons for this American obsession with regime change in Iran, which is something that's been going on for over 4 decades. Whoever is in power in the White House, doesn't matter. It's a bipartisan issue. How this is going to continue, even though this current attempt at regime change failed completely, but it will continue. And of course, the possibility of another stupid attack on Iran, considering that Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier, just crossed the Malacca Strait, is on the way, and it might get to the Sea of Oman and the Persian Gulf by the end of this week. So this will give an extra, let's say, extra poison in terms of the Neo Caligula in Mar-a-Lago, Washington, that axis, trying to have ideas. But I also explain why there was not an armed attack on Iran this time. All that bullshit about the Gulfies, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Oman especially, picking up the phone, calling the White House and say, don't do this because this is going to turn the Persian Gulf into a ring of fire, or is going to generate blowback and all that. This is not the real issue, nor was Tel Aviv picking up the phone and calling Moscow to tell the Iranians via the Russians, look, we're not going to strike first if Iran doesn't strike first. This is all diversionist tactic. The real issue is the United States didn't have enough assets around Iran in all those bases, in the Persian Gulf, whatever, for a super hardcore shock and awe strike, which this time would be a decapitation strike, even including Ayatollah Khamenei and probably the whole government, the whole of IRGC, you name it. They didn't have the assets in place. So this means that when they have the assets in place, this will be a possible scenario. So probably not going to be within this week or so. It could be in a matter of 2 or 3 months, but they will come back. There's no question about that. And the main reason is, I would like to have your insight about that specifically. It's because the Trump 2.0 administration and the elites behind, the guys who run the show, and this is a bipartisan issue, and it's over the bipartisan connection. They finally figured out, and this is something that we can say was a few months ago already, and it's also reflected in the national security strategy, that the empire of, as I describe it now, the empire of chaos, then metastasized into the empire of blood, and now metastasized into the empire of permanent strikes against anybody, right? They finally came to the conclusion that they are being expelled from Eurasia, essentially by Russia and China. And there is nothing they can do about it, apart from trying to dismember Eurasia organicity and their drive towards establishing a multipolar, multinodal new system of international relations, blowing up BRICS and the SCO from inside. And what does that mean? A direct attack on Iran, incapacitating Iran, decapitating Iran, and turning Iran to the Western camp, let's put it this way, would be NATO stunned, but especially the empire, and trying to turn Iran into a sort of new Venezuela, which, by the way, there has not been any regime change in Venezuela. So even if they tried this in Iran, there's no guarantee that they would get regime change in Iran. But psychosis, Nima, and all of you, our audience, is still there. The only chance that they have of not being expelled from Eurasia and from this constitution of the new Eurasian century is if they break up this organization of Eurasia from the inside. And that means an attack on Iran.
Yeah. Pepe, you know what's tragic about being in Iran and seeing what has happened is that the people were criticizing the government for their decision, for considering the economy, the difficulties they're facing. But it was tragic to see, they don't let the people, even with the economy, with the problems they're facing, to put pressure on the government to have the legitimate, right to ask the government to change the policies considering the economy of Iran. They, every time someone says something, they just trying to ruin everything. That's why this is the problem. Many people don't understand it. You have to be in Iran to feel how they manipulate everything. They don't let people to use their rights, to ask the government, to criticize the government. Every time a protest happening, they try to turn it into a riot. They're trying to kill people. They're trying to burn things here. This is a tragedy, and we know what is happening. We know what has happened for such a long time all around Iran. Considering all, going to Armenia, Azerbaijan, coming, to Iraq, Afghanistan, Even with the case of Pakistan, you see all together, they have created such a situation in Iran that the government has no choice but to, to monitor everything, because that takes a lot of time, huge amount of money, a lot of, effort to do such a thing when you are attacked from every, you know, angle.
All
This
fronts.
is the problem.
Nima,
Just imagine the
yes.
same happening to the United States, the greatest, as they call it, the greatest superpower on this planet. They cannot survive such a situation, and they're putting all this pressure on Iran and Iranian society, Iranian government.
Nima, very important. Did you feel that the government was trying to explain to the average Iranian, to the general population, the reasons for the current economic crisis? Were they talking, for instance, about a speculative attack on the real? Were they talking about this maximum pressure of sanctions everywhere? Did they try to explain to the population why, for instance, the cost of living was going up and up and up nonstop?
Yeah. What was happening during the first 2 days of protests? The riots didn't happen in those days. We haven't that much of chaos and riots. The Pezeshkian government, they have invited the shopkeepers, many people who are the economists, all together, talking with the presidents, with the various institutions within the government, describing the difficulties and trying to solve, cooperate with these people. What was happening? They were trying to do something together with the economists, with the shopkeepers, with the people involved in, as they call it, bazaar here.
Sure.
And when they perceived from outside that something is happening, that may turn down, that may just make every protest disappeared from the scene, they started this sort of movement. They, they came with a new attitude. They said these people are not part of the chaos came after this meeting, Pepe. It was so important because the government was so aware of what was happening. And they wanted to do something. They wanted to talk with the people, ordinary people on streets, with this, those people, the higher people, those people who are selling goods to the people. But it was a pre-planned protest, Pepe. It was all pre-prepared. They have been prepared for this. They know, Pepe, in my opinion, they know they cannot defeat Iran militarily. They have to make a huge chaos, even with the attack. The American attack on Iran was a huge sort of propaganda machine to convince people to come again to the streets, to make new chaos, to make new riots. It was all about that, because when Donald Trump was asking the people that he's going to attack, I'm going to attack in the next 7 hours, 2 hours, he was literally asking people to come out.
Sure.
Get the institutions, take over the institutions, take over the government, note the name of those people who are, the security forces. It was all you cannot say that the United States didn't know about it. They were all behind this sort of scenario.
Of course, because they were
prepared. But it's all, the people came out the day that the internet was cut off. The people came out in all major cities here in Iran. The people came out and said, these protests have nothing to do with Iran. And that was the breaking point for the United States strategy here in Iran.
A very tricky question, Nima. Okay, you may have come across maybe some intel information, if you can tell us about it, of course. But would you say that the Rouhani-Zarif faction, which, as we all know, is intimately connected to factions in Washington, D.C. and in New York, were they aware of the regime change op? were they collaborating with it, or were they completely outside of the picture?
There is no evidence. There is no piece of information, proving that Rouhani and Zarif was helping these protests, as far as I have seen, and because I haven't seen such a thing, Pepe. There are rumors. I know
There are
there are
rumors
rumors out.
including that they are under
Yeah.
house arrest, but we couldn't confirm that with anybody. Yes.
Because the Pezeshkian, Pepe, let's put it this way: the Pezeshkian government is not a, they have the people who are close to, to the reformists. They have the people from the center. They have the people from the right, left, all together. It's a government of all these people together. But if there was such a thing as big as what you've just mentioned about Rouhani and Zarif, it would be all over the, the
Yes, but I'm
internet.
talking especially something made in the shade, very discreet, but including actual support and even informational support, which is something that the people around Rouhani and Zarif can do because they understand how the machinery of government works as well. They were part of the government before. So, of course, we all know for the moment it's rumors, but these rumors are starting to become a little more insistent than before. You see?
Yeah, but let's put it this way, Pepe. Last time Zarif was talking as Doha,
yes,
you saw his performance. He was not the Zarif who was negotiating JCPOA. Even the Zarif that we saw when this government has started. The initial days, he was trying to do the same. But Zarif has changed his mind, Pepe. After all, Zarif understands. I think he knows the reality of what is happening right now, considering the new geopolitical reality of the region. And he has decided. You can clearly hear him. Because last time he was talking to the press was that in Doha.
In Doha.
And he said it loudly that he feels that Iran has decided to go to consider the East is not all about the United States anymore. And
that's
Iran is seeking for partnership, and Russia and China are showing the honest partner of Iran. Since then, I haven't heard Zarif talking anything. I don't think that's why I think that Zarif is not. He has made his mind. He has changed. Not only Zarif, many people have changed because the attack on Iran, Israeli attack on Iran, even with the new sort of propaganda that after these sort of riots in Iran, protest riots in Iran, the attack, Donald Trump coming out saying that I'm going to attack. And these people are seeing this. And it's not just about, and they know what's going on. And I cannot imagine without Iran being Iran, as today we see, there is no meaning of Zarif or Rouhani. These people have no meaning without Iran, Pepe.
Absolutely.
They understand that.
No matter who and no matter how the current 47th President of the United States is treated today, it is impossible not to recognize that our orange old man from Washington knows how to shock not only his enemies, but even close associates. Honestly, I was pleased to watch the shocking reaction of European and American globalists during Trump's hour-long speech at the International Economic Forum in Davos. During this speech, Donald Trump managed not only to insult all the so-called European allies of the United States, but even to make a rather harsh statement about Switzerland, where this scandalous forum was held. In particular, Donald Trump accused Switzerland of ingratitude, and that this confederation has become rich only at the expense of the United States. In addition, Trump once again accused Europe of weakness, saying that the United States does not need such weak allies. According to him, Europe cannot even resolve the Ukrainian conflict on its own, which has been going on for 4 years at the borders of the European Union. Trump stressed that it is Europe that must assume full financial and military responsibility for the current conflict on its borders. Simultaneously with this, the current occupant of the White House once again expressed dissatisfaction with NATO. In particular, Trump called NATO an unfair organization, since for all these decades, it existed and functioned solely thanks to the money of American taxpayers. By the way, many representatives of the globalist clans, in the audience, could hardly hide their anger and irritation. Seeing a disgruntled expression on their faces, it was clear that they were dreaming that Trump would finally shut up. However, unfortunately for them, Trump did not stop and continued to shock everyone in the room. In particular, the US president once again raised the issue regarding Greenland. Trump made it clear that such a weak country as Denmark does not deserve the right to own Greenland. According to him, during World War II, Denmark surrendered to Germany 6 hours after the start of hostilities, and it was only thanks to the protection of the United States that Greenland did not fall into the hands of the Nazis. Trump noted that after World War II, the United States made a strategic mistake by returning Greenland to such a weak and defenseless country as Denmark. Perhaps in Trump's entire speech, the only positive thing for the Europeans was the fact that the US president officially assured that he is not going to annex Greenland through military force. According to him, Greenland will become part of the United States only as a result of the deal to sell the island. However, immediately after that, Trump warned that if European countries prevented him from buying Greenland, the United States would never forget this unfriendly step. By the way, immediately after the devastating speech of the President of the United States in Davos, Dmitry Medvedev made a rather alarming statement. In particular, the former Russian president said that the Greenland issue could become a political trap for Trump. Medvedev claims that at the moment, the so-called European leaders, trembling with fear, are literally begging Trump to take Greenland only under guardianship, but at the same time, not to deprive Denmark of ownership of this island. The Europeans have made it clear that the United States can do anything on the island, but at the same time, Washington should not change Greenland's flag. However, according to Medvedev, Trump needs Greenland to be completely annexed by the United States. Dmitry Medvedev claims that Trump dreams of going down in history, as Vladimir Putin did with the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula in 2014. At the same time, Medvedev emphasized that, unlike Trump, Vladimir Putin is returning lands that have been part of Russia for centuries. Furthermore, Medvedev also made it clear that Trump's adventure with Greenland could end badly for the 47th President of the United States. According to Medvedev, Greenland's annexation to the United States will cause devastating damage to NATO. Dmitry Medvedev asserts that there are specific entities within the United States committed to preventing NATO's collapse at all costs. Against this backdrop, Medvedev expressed confidence that if Donald Trump continues to adhere to his destructive policy towards NATO, the 47th President of the United States may simply not live to see the end of his four-year term in office. Meanwhile, on January 22, the chief coordinator of the Russian underground in Ukraine, Sergei Lebedev, made a series of shocking statements. In particular, speaking to Russian journalists, he said that the Russian aerospace forces are systematically increasing the intensity of missile attacks on Ukraine. At the same time, the number and nomenclature of Russian missiles and drones used is also growing rapidly almost every day. Furthermore, Sergei Lebedev also confirmed that over the past 10 days, Russia has significantly increased the number of attacks on the places of location of foreign mercenaries and NATO forces in the Odessa and Nikolaev regions. All this indicates that the effectiveness of Russian military intelligence continues to gain momentum in Ukraine. By the way, last night was no exception either. So, on the night of January 22, the Russian long-range anti-ship cruise missile, Kh-22 Storm, hit an alumina plant in the settlement of Galitsinovo in the Nikolaev region. As it turned out, the training camp of the fighters of Britain's elite Special Air Service was located on the territory of this plant. According to Sergei Lebedev, it was one of the largest classified NATO military facilities in the Nikolaev region. At the same time, he noted that in addition to the British, there were also Canadian soldiers at this military facility, along with 280 Nazis from the Azov Regiment. Reports indicate that all of them were planning sabotage operations in the territories controlled by Russia in the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, as well as in the Crimean Peninsula. Sergei Lebedev noted that as a result of this Russian missile strike, the number of victims among elite British, Canadian, and Ukrainian soldiers turned out to be so high that the corpses were removed from the territory of the plant throughout the day, using 3 buses. Thus, as you can see, Russia is not only systematically destroying the Ukrainian Nazis, but also depriving NATO countries of their best and most experienced fighters. For example, it will take Britain years to recover the huge losses among experienced soldiers and officers who have been killed in Ukraine over the past 4 years.
In our life. But true words were spoken there, and by the ultimate globalist, and we'll be examining the import of them. The Iceman cometh. Donald Trump loves a bit of ice with his full fat Coca-Cola, and although he confused Iceland with Greenland and the Azerbaijan-Babylonian War, he did speak some home truths to the globalist vassals, happy vassals, formerly, now miserable slaves, according to the Prime Minister of Belgium. It is all happening so fast I can hardly keep up. It's 3 o'clock in the morning here, but I'm ready. Are you? It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the
of ice so large it could fuel Donald Trump's Coca-Cola habit for the rest of his life, for the rest of his progeny's life. He means to have it, and one way or another, he's going to have it. And he wants Canada too. There's a fair bit of ice up there also. He regards Mark Carney, about whom more later, as the governor of an American state. No more and no less. He is rampant, rampaging, and when he's jet-lagged, well, he's even worse. He confused Greenland with Iceland, which must have had them twitching in Reykjavik. They thought it was Greenland he was going for. Turns out it was Iceland. Well, ice, snow, you know the rest, as Joe Biden might well have put it. He said that he's going to have it whether it's by purchase. The Louisiana purchase pales by significance, although the land was actually of rather more value there. He says 700 billion pounds, dollars, I should say. $700 billion plus $100,000 one-off upfront payment for every Greenlander. Every Eskimo and his dog and his polar bear will be queuing up for $100,000, which will be gone before you can say Jack Robinson, at least at the current rate of depreciation of the US dollar. China just dumped $61 billion worth of American debt, almost 10% of its remaining holding. It's shedding American debt and financial instruments at a rate of knots. Denmark just announced it's dumping American debt and all US Treasury instruments. The crash of the dollar is coming. And $1.6 trillion was lost on the New York Stock Exchange just yesterday. Sometimes I think Donald Trump is a secret agent of ours. He's single-handedly wrecking everything that I've spent my whole life fighting against. Hallelujah. I take my hat off to you, Donald. Comrade Donald J. Trump, as I one day may have to learn to call you. But let's go back to Mark Carney, because Mark Carney spoke truths beyond measure in Davos. The fact that he's the ultimate globalist, Goldman Sachs, the governor of the Bank of England, and then shoehorned in, unelected, without even a seat in Parliament at the time, as the Prime Minister of the 51st, or is it the 52nd state of the United States of America. Turns out that Carney has the Ministry of Defense. It's not called the Ministry of War there, unlike in the United States, but their Ministry of Defense has devised a whole plan for guerrilla warfare if Donald Trump invades the United States. That's the stage we've gotten to, that Canada has a war plan of taking to the hills and the forests, the mountains, the glaciers. He's going to fight them in the redwoods. He's going to fight them on the streets littered by fentanyl addicts in Western Vancouver. He is going to fight if Donald Trump wants war. And I don't know where that would leave Britain, because Canada is actually titularly still a part of Britain. Well, at least our king, do we still have one? King Charles is the head of state of Canada. That, I guess, would therefore place us in a state of war with the United States of America. That's the stage we've gotten to, that Denmark is garrisoning Greenland. So is the EU part of the NATO military alliance. Article 5 is about to be invoked, not against Russia, not against China, about whom more later, but against the main funder, armor, and supplier of the poor bloody infantry, the United States of America. That's the stage we're in. Britain, with the spike up its ass, it's not able really to turn one way or the other, sent a token force to garrison Greenland, a token force of 1 soldier. I'm not making that up. The French sent 50. The Italians sent 15. The Germans sent 15. And then immediately withdrew them when Trump promised more tariffs in response to any European Union country that is standing in his way on Greenland. It didn't save them because Trump then promptly introduced a 10% tariff on all of them, rising to 50% in June, which is, believe it or not that long distant, and 100% tariffs, 200% tariffs on France, his nemesis, the sunglass-wearing indoors Emmanuel Macron, the Macrolian of the French Republic. 200% on champagne. How would the Americans ever survive the dearth of champagne that would undoubtedly result? The Danes are refusing to send any more Ozempic. So that is Mike Pompeo done and dusted. Every person in Hollywood currently jabbing themselves with Ozempic are going to have to find an alternative because the Danes produce all of it and they're not going to send it to you anymore. And with your freedom fries, you can forget about Danish bacon. You can go and sizzle somebody else's bacon. These are the times we are living in. The EU just suspended the trade agreement it had initialed with the United States of America, declaring trade war on the United States of America. They're firing tariffs and sanctions now. Will they be firing missiles, bombs, bullets when the chickens, do they have chickens in Greenland? Geese, they must have geese when the goose comes home to roost. But back to Mark Carney, the ultimate smooth-talking globalist. I mean, I've got to say something. I really despise Mark Carney, but at least he can speak English. At least he's a grown-up. At least he can speak in sentences, in paragraphs. At least he doesn't confuse Azerbaijan with Azerbaijan. At least he doesn't confuse Armenia with Albania. At least he's not threatening Outer Mongolia when he thinks he's threatening Afghanistan. Mark Carney is a very smart guy. He spent all of his life earning hundreds of millions of dollars, pounds, and euros. So I guess he must be. But Mark Carney clearly chose his words carefully. And he told us something, a truth that will now shape the world. He said, not only is the rules-based international order dead, but that it was always a lie. He used that word. And he said, the middle range countries, like Canada, like Britain, like everybody else really, went along with the lie. His word, not mine, because it benefited them to do so. Now, I don't know about you, but I have spent most of my adult life stating exactly that truth, for which I've been falsely accused of being a communist, a Baathist, a Nasserist, a Maoist, a Trotskyist, every ist you could think of, even though I'm actually not guilty of any of those epithets. I have been traduced, ridiculed, insulted, marginalized, demoted, expelled for speaking the simple truth that Mark Carney, the ultimate globalist, spoke where? In Davos. In Davos, he said that it's over. The old world is over and it isn't coming back. Again, his words, not mine. This in the immediate aftermath of him having flown to Beijing and kowtowed to the new emperor of the world, President Xi Jinping of the Communist Party-run People's Republic of China. Because it turns out that a communist government is able to run a mixed economy better than any capitalist country has ever achieved. Such is the absolute dominance now of the world economic scene of the People's Republic of China. Everyone must go to Beijing and, metaphorically speaking, kowtow, because Xi Jinping is not an emperor and he doesn't appreciate people kowtowing to him. The Chinese kowtow, or am I mixing them up with the Japanese? I'm doing a Donald Trump here. Now, Carney promptly reduced, while he was on stage in Davos, the tariff on Chinese electric vehicles from 100% to 6%. Chinese cars are about to flood Canada. Why? Because they're far better than our cars. Chinese cars are absolutely dazzlingly brilliant. If anyone wants to send me a Zeekr, Z-E-K-R, I'm ready to take the keys. The Chinese automobile industry and the Chinese EVs, electric vehicles, are so good, nobody can compete with them. That's why they've got to tariff them. That's why they've got to sanction them. That's why, like in Britain, they've got to claim that their roadworthiness is not yet established. But if you go to half the world, they are clogging up the traffic. There are so many of them, a dazzling variety of them. So they're all coming to Canada. So goodbye the US manufacturing of automobiles, because it won't be long before, by one means or another, those Chinese vehicles are driving around the streets of San Francisco. And you've got a treat coming if you are a driver. I mean, the Tesla's quite good, but the Chinese electronic vehicles are simply unbeatable. And Carney was absolutely open about it. All roads now lead to China. So much so that Sir Keir Starmer is packing right now. Better check the weather, Keir. It's pretty cold in China right now. Keir Starmer is heading to China. That's right, the Keir Starmer who spent the last period of his office and before in the premiership of little Rishi Sunak, or as Joe Biden called him, Rashid Sunak. The Keir Starmer that's headed for Beijing has variously described China as prime minister and as leader of the opposition as a security threat to the United Kingdom. They blocked for years China's new embassy in London on suspicion that the underground parts of the building might be used for illegal interrogation, might be used as a spy base, a spy hub. That's the Keir Starmer who sent what's left of the Royal Navy, a bit Gilbertian now, Gilbert and Sullivan Navy now, but what's left of it, he sent to the South China Sea, across which I have just passed. He sent our warships to threaten China. He supported the call by von der Leyen for all European Union countries to send their naval assets to the South China Sea, to the Straits of Taiwan, to menace and threaten China. They called China a threat. They called China an enemy. They called China a power which is illicitly infiltrating spies into the British Parliament. The Speaker of the Parliament just the other month called an emergency statement to tell everyone that the Chinese were coming, that there might be a Chinaman under their bed, that they need to look over their shoulder at a Fu Manchu who might be following them. I'm not making any of this up. This all happened. And now Keir Starmer is going there to beg forgiveness from China, to beg for investment, to beg for some crumbs off the table of a sumptuous banquet, I have no doubt, which he will be offered. I mean, even I was given a 26-course banquet in my honor by the Deputy Foreign Minister of China. When it came to item 21, which was bull's penis, I politely declined. And she quietly explained that we don't have mad cow disease in China, you know. I didn't have the heart to tell her. It was the fact that it was a bull's penis that I was going to have to swallow. I couldn't possibly do that, being a pale, male, straight man from Dundee in Scotland and of the working class. Now, that's all a digression. Keir Starmer was not the only one. President Macron, dark glasses and all, he looked like a character out of the Pink Panther. Clouseau, et boom, he was Peter Sellers in action. There he was up there, speaking English with his Gallic turn, and he said that we all need investment from China. China has to come to our aid. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about any of this. I want amity in the world. I just wonder why we had to have so much enmity before the amity began to break out. I just wondered why we had to spend all that money on weapons of war and war games and military maneuvers in the Straits of Taiwan before people were able to see a truth so blindingly obvious that I, who left school at 16 and went to work in Michelin tire factory, was able to see it from the very beginning. But maybe I'm being churlish. Well, France, Britain, Mark Carney are all marching to China. And when they get there, they're going to take a deep, deep bow. Donald Trump, Iceland, Greenland, Azerbaijan, Babylon, any way you cut it, is on the rampage. The question is, where will the ice chips fall? That's what we'll be talking about tonight. It's the mother.
Revolutionary salute, soldier.
Well, it's my way or the highway. That's the message from President Donald Trump on Greenland. Trump has reportedly delivered an ultimatum to a group of European countries: accept the sale of Greenland to the United States or face additional trade tariffs. Here's what he posted on Truth Social. Shockingly, our brilliant NATO ally, the United Kingdom, is currently planning to give away the island of Diego Garcia, the site of a vital U.S. military base, to Mauritius, and to do so for no reason whatsoever. There's no doubt that China and Russia have noticed this act of total weakness. These are international powers who recognize strength, which is why the United States of America, under my leadership, is now, after only 1 year, respected like never before. The UK giving away extremely important land is an act of great stupidity, and there's another in a very long line of national security reasons why Greenland has to be acquired. Denmark and its European allies have to do the right thing. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So make no mistake about it. Of course, the Arctic is the future battlefield. It's of strategic vital importance, and it cannot be overstated. So is this threat real, and what does this mean for the future of NATO? Dr. Olga Ravasi joins us now to break it all down. Welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
Good to see you guys. I haven't seen you in a while. Happy New Year.
Happy New
I'm
Year
still in the
as well.
New Year. And Natalie, don't feel bad. I had a spoonful of Nutella this morning, so
If we're confessing things, there was also a Reese's in there. So, we want to get your take on whether or not the United States is really willing to break this faux friendship with Europe over Greenland. What do you think?
Well, I think it's high time for us to reevaluate who we are as Americans, first and foremost, what it is that benefits us. And as president, Donald J. Trump is the commander in chief. His priority must be what is of interest to us as the American people. And I think what we need to do and what he needs to do is put that to the forefront and decouple from these false alliances that have become a liability. And the false alliances that have, sometimes even become unconstitutional for us, have led us into wars, have led us on these adventures that never benefited the American people, were quite detrimental to our interests, have bankrupted the country. So at this point, Europeans threatening that NATO will be broken up, well, that is exactly what the American people kind of want. We're tired of the global institutions that have taken priority over our own interests. So yes, the key word right now should be decouple from the European Union, which is a whole bunch of unelected bureaucrats. I'm watching them kind of get all wrapped up about this situation and in Denmark and Greenland. And yes, rightfully so. However, they have set many precedents to this. May I mention Kosovo? May I mention even Cyprus? May I mention Crimea, that the Russians are taking as their own precedent because they are listing Kosovo and others as something that we have set up through the rules-based globalist order or liberal order, which always meant rules for thee, rule for me and not for thee. So at this point, President Trump needs to stand up to the European leaders who are kind of acting like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse there. And you mentioned they're sending about 100 soldiers. Well, I understand there's some huskies and, sleigh dogs, but not to make light of this situation. I think what is emerging is the multipolar world, whether we want it or not. The last time we had something similar to this was obviously during Cold War, where you had two global military powers. I saw something interesting the other day, and I thought it was funny and humorous, but I think that's where we're going. It looked like a map of the world and sort of President Trump drawing on it with red marker. And on the Western hemisphere, he put me, and then over across Asia, he put Putin, and then on the South, he put President Xi. And that's basically what I see emerging, multipolar world where Russia, the United States, and China are going to be the primary players, and the rest of the globe will essentially have to fall in. We also must remember that in the global real politics, we really don't have friends, we have interests. And at this point, it is in our interest not only to decouple from globalist institutions, but to actually look at what belongs to us in the Western hemisphere. And, for Germany and France, for example, to try to challenge us over Greenland would be just as ridiculous as, if China and Russia were trying to challenge us now in Latin America. So I think that's where we are, whether we like it or not.
So it seems like this is the end of NATO. Maybe it's not dead tomorrow. It's not dead on Saturday. But this, if you have the United States of America taking a country from a NATO country, what does this mean truly for the future of NATO? And if the map, as you say, is Trump says me over here, Putin up here to the north, she is to, then that leaves NATO out of the mix completely. Or excuse me, that leaves the EU out of the mix almost completely. Off the table.
Well, it does, but you're right. It actually does leave NATO out completely. And may I remind everybody of Article 5, and look where that got us, how much protection that offers. But again, I will go back to Cyprus because there are several conversations that are happening here. Can Article 5 and is Article 5 protecting NATO allies? That's conversation number one. And conversation number two is accession to the European Union, where at some point there were rules that said those countries that have contested borders cannot join European Union. Well, again, I go back to Cyprus. Cyprus has been occupied, partially occupied by Turkey since 1974, but that didn't stop them. Serbia was bombed illegally, and then Kosovo unilaterally declared independence in 2008 with, can I remind everybody again, Denmark being one of the first countries to recognize this independence. Now, Kosovo being a pet project of the United States, of the deep state, United States, of the globalist swamp, is now in a really tricky position because look, anytime the Americans do something, there's the leaders of Kosovo saying, oh, we support, here we are the best ally, we are your pet project. Well, now they also owe a favor to the Danish because they recognize them immediately. So I'm really curious to see how they're going to stretch themselves and prove loyalty to the deep state that it created them essentially, and then also be loyal to their European quote unquote partners and sponsors who recognize them. So yes, look, if NATO is going to be breaking apart over this, I say we welcome it because NATO essentially has been targeted by President Trump ever since he came into office and started campaigning in 2015, 2016. NATO has become a liability. European Union is a liability, but European Union leaders and leaders of the European countries have done this to themselves. And unfortunately, they have done this to their own people. So
Right.
I'm just kind of watching when the Europeans are going to kind of stand up for their own interest and understand that their leadership has brought them to this point.
Well, don't you hate when people say, I told you so? Yeah, that's me, actually, because I did tell you, sorry, but I told you that gold and silver were going to reap the benefits of excessive money printing, the Fed just printing money like crazy, overvalued markets, global unrest.
It's comical, but also tragic. It should not happen like this. These are elected leaders
Also,
communicating over text.
Also, you're publishing someone's private text messages.
Well, President Trump did that. Yeah,
Right.
all of it feels almost buffoonish. What can we make of this?
I feel
From
like
both
we're
sides.
watching Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Well, it's buffoonish simply because these selected leaders are essentially buffoons. And they are completely incompetent. They have proven themselves to be completely incompetent. They are not there for their own people. They have been indebted to the globalist institutions, and the globalist institutions have dictated to them very selective policies depending on where they are. And I have outlined some of those. So the selectiveness and the double standard and the hypocrisy is now coming. Chickens are coming home to roost because it's knocking on their door. And now when we have certain regions that are disputed all of a sudden in Europe that are not going along their agenda, now they're saying, well, let's talk about it. Well, why are they even complimenting what's happening in Iran? Why are they complimenting what's happening in Syria?
Yeah.
We are sowing discord everywhere. And we are leaving a trail of blood behind us. And we have been doing it for many, many years. And, many foreign nations have used the United States as their tool to bludgeon others to death, literally. And at this point, I think President Trump needs to take charge, needs to do what is good for the American people, needs to do what is good for us, and needs to decouple. So at this stage, look, I feel I'm European by ancestry. I feel deeply for our European brothers and sisters over there, but I also think they need to grow some backbone. And I think their leadership needs to be challenged. I also noticed that the joint EU statements are being blocked by leaders like Orban, like Fico. So there is some backbone there. There are leaders who are challenging this quote unquote false unity. And I think it needs to continue being challenged. The Europeans need to turn inward, just like we as Americans need to turn inward and look. Russians and Chinese are not interested in going to war with us. they're interested in doing business with us. And we're not going to go to war over any territory, although what's happening in Ukraine is a huge proxy war. But again, it's being led by Europeans and by NATO, which proves my point. It's a liability for us.
Yeah.
We don't need the liability anymore.
Dr. Ogle, we'll get you out of here on this. What do you think happens next with Greenland? You already see Polymarket saying that there's a 1 in 4 chance of an invasion. That seems like that's a low number at this point. But what do you think the timetable looks like for this annexation of Greenland?
I think President Trump needs a win, quite honestly, in the foreign policy realm, although he is talking about some of those wins that he outlined during this campaign. He will do what needs to be done and what he is being advised on. I can't give you a timetable. What I can tell you is that the Europeans are bluffing. They're certainly not going to militarily, at least, stand up against us. Neither will the Canadians. I heard their prime minister say something to that effect. We're not going to go into any kind of military intrusion. I mean, I don't know, maybe we can kidnap their prime minister.
Right.
Sorry.
We're good at that, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, not to make light of this, I'm just kind of trying to paint a picture of everything that's going on globally and how, again, selectively we have done this to ourselves. Timeline, as far as President Trump is concerned, probably should have been yesterday, because that is what we need. But we will see how the rest reacts. As I said, I think this is going to be the decisions that are going to be made by 3 current superpowers. And not only Greenland, the fate of Greenland, but the fate of all of the other contested regions in this world. And I think that's what we're looking at. So I don't expect military incursion. I do expect strongly worded statements out of the Europeans, but I think they will leave it at that.
Right. We saw in
They know
European
better.
Parliament today, like, hey, Donald Trump, F off. If you're really taking that seriously, you need to get your head examined. The European Union, they're just going to stand there with platitudes. They really don't have any... There's nothing for them to do except sit in the corner and watch, really.
There really isn't, and I
drink
think
tiny
everybody
coffees.
knows that. But of course, that's all they can do. Kind
Yeah.
of bark up, but they're barking up the wrong tree. They need to bark internally and figure out what they're going to do with their own countries, because
I ask you-
truly the
Yeah.
Europeans have shot themselves in the foot.
I want to ask you, but I'm sorry to keep you longer. We do need to move on.
No,
but
no worries.
where did they go wrong? Where could they have avoided this? Is it really the forming the European Union decapitated all of these nations that could have once been strong, or is it way farther back than this?
That is part of it. They have decapitated themselves because they have turned their sovereignty to the unelected bureaucrats. But at the same time, NATO, we must remember, plays a huge role in I know a lot of people do not want to hear this, but I do consistently go back to the Balkans, because the Balkans in the 1990s have served as the blueprint for a lot of what we're experiencing today, and including the reinvention of NATO. NATO was obsolete when the Warsaw Pact fell apart. And when we came out of that Cold War, where I mentioned we had kind of spheres of influence, which I think is where we're going back to. And I think that was fairly healthy. I'm not advocating that we go back to the Soviet Union era of the Cold War, but what I'm advocating and saying, whether we like it or not, we're going to go back to each superpower controlling their own sphere of influence and doing business with one another, which is what really matters and what they really want. Although we need to neuter some of the voices here in the United States that are consistently pushing us into war, like Lindsey Graham's of this world, who consistently want us to go to war with Russia, with China, with Iran. If we neuter these voices here, and the Russians and Chinese have certainly neutered the voices of, those war-hungry voices in their own nations, we are going to get to the point where we're doing business. So yes, where we went wrong was reinventing NATO and going into this unipolar global liberal order that now is proving to everybody that has failed. So there are many elements to it, but I think the European Union, the bureaucrat institutions, the globalist institutions have actually sacrificed their own peoples, their own sovereignty, and these big entangling alliances through the globalist institutions, and not just NATO and European Union, but you guys are talking about Davos and World Economic Forum and the United Nations and World Health Organization. I mean, every single chaotic event that has taken place in the world has had ties to some of these globalist institutions. And it's really high time for the United States to decouple from them. And that will spell out imminent death to these institutions because simply they depend on us. Now, I did see something that Europeans want to create a new military order of some sort that will include Ukraine. So it's one of those, like, I don't want to play with you anymore and give me my toys back. They can have their toys back. I think we're going to be just fine.
Ooh,
and
not Ukraine. Okay.
I know. We're so scared.
Do you, just to be clear, are you saying that you believe President Trump should pay for and buy Greenland? Is that where you come down on this? I don't know that we asked you outright where you come down on this.
I don't know if we're really going to be paying for it per se. We'll see how that plays out. I saw President Putin talk about this the other day, and he kind of almost sounded like, to me, gave a green light and kind of outlined some historical attempts of the United States trying to acquire Greenland. So I don't know if we're going to really. I was watching it the other day, and I can't remember where he was giving an interview, but he actually kind of sounded like he understands our attempt to do this. So I fall on kind of that exact map going back to the beginning. Here's us, here's Putin, here's and I think the spheres of influence are going to become clear, and we're going to do business, and we're not going to go to war. Maybe it sounds naive and simplistic, but I think that is President Trump, that is his gut feeling, it seems like, although sometimes he gets bad advice. So I feel that's where he wants to go. So maybe I think that's where we need to be. It'll be healthy for us.
I think Colonel McGregor was kind of
Not
echoing.
so sure that the American people need to pay for it.
Yeah, $700 billion.
I draw the line there. We're not paying.
We already paid for Ukraine. We don't even have it.
Exactly.
So,
I think we're done paying.
Yeah.
Well, how much money have we already given to the European Union, for crying out loud? So maybe it's, I don't know.
Well, so here's the thing. They're threatening us with tariffs again. So, I mean, from what I understand, we'll see how. I think it's a longer process to see what the real benefit or disadvantages are of this tariff war. But the American people don't want to pay for anything anymore. So I think that is something we need to take away with this.
Well, we can't afford groceries, so that's probably we don't want to buy Greenland.
Exactly.
All right, Dr. Ogul Ravasi,
well,
thank you.
Maybe if we mine enough, we'll afford groceries. If we mine up there and,
Yeah, plenty of resources there. Well,
Coffee. Follow me.